Hey everyone, I'm Peter Stories here to guide you today. If you use this video to drift off to sleep, please tap like, hit subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Now settle in, get cozy, and let yourself relax. Melissa Rodriguez woke from the dream with Trevor Adams's scream still echoing in her skull. Not the sound itself, but the feeling of it. Vocal cords tearing as something with too many joints bent him backward until his spine snapped like green wood. She'd watched it happen from behind her own eyes, unable to move, unable to help. While October rain hammered the tent, and a woman in white stood perfectly still in the downpour, long black hair plastered across a face that held no features, only darkness. The dream had come 3 nights running, identical each time, and Melissa's PhD in ecological science offered no framework for why she knew with absolute cellular certainty that Trevor was already dead and had been for 72 hours. Her iPhone 3GS showed 0547 hours, alarm set for 0600. Melissa turned it off, sat up in her Seattle apartment bedroom, and tried to apply logic to the illogical. Vivid, recurring nightmares had documented neurological explanations: stress, anxiety, pattern-seeking behavior in an overactive prefrontal cortex. She'd been working with Trevor on the Olympic-spotted owl population survey for 6 months, spending weeks in backcountry together. Professional relationship built on shared data and mutual respect for scientific methodology. When he'd missed 3 consecutive radio check-ins, concern was natural. Dreaming about worst-case scenarios was predictable psychological response. Except the dream contained details Melissa couldn't have known. The specific tent model Trevor used, North Face VE25, orange fly sheet with black trim, the exact location in the Hoh rainforest backcountry where she'd never been. The woman's white garment, which her waking mind recognized as a kimono despite having no conscious reference for traditional Japanese clothing. And the cold, that penetrating chill that felt like it originated from somewhere outside temperature, outside physics, a cold that meant something impossible. Park Dispatch had requested she deploy at 800 hours. Trevor's emergency beacon had activated briefly 2 days ago, coordinates deep in the Hoh wilderness, then gone silent. Standard protocol: send another biologist who knew the subject, who could identify personal effects, who wouldn't panic at finding a colleague injured or worse. Melissa had volunteered immediately because that's what you did, what professional obligation demanded. She packed methodically. Garmin eTrex Vista HCX GPS unit, fully charged. VHF radio program to park frequencies. Digital Nikon D90 for documentation. First aid kit expanded for wilderness trauma. 3 days food. Rain gear appropriate for Olympic Peninsula October. Waterproof everything because the Hoh rainforest averaged 200 inches annually, and October was peak deluge season. Her field notebook, blank pages ready for observations. The dream had shown her the tent from inside. She'd been lying in Trevor's sleeping bag, paralyzed, watching the woman in white through mesh that shouldn't have been transparent but was. The woman hadn't moved, hadn't breathed, had simply existed in the rain like a statue carved from mist and malice. Then Trevor had entered the tent, Melissa watching through his eyes now, perspective shifting impossibly. And the woman had followed, hair moving independent of physics, reaching, touching, bending him backward with grip that left no marks but crushed vertebrae anyway. Melissa's scientific training insisted dreams weren't prophetic. Couldn't be. Causality ran one direction: past informed, present informed future. The brain constructed narratives from accumulated data, pattern matched against stored memories, generated probabilistic scenarios. Nothing more. The fact that she'd dreamed Trevor's death meant only that her subconscious was processing legitimate concern about a missing colleague. The helicopter insertion at 0930 hours went smoothly. Pilot dropped her at coordinates half a mile from Trevor's last GPS ping, promised extraction in 72 hours, weather permitting. Olympic October weather rarely permitted, but Melissa had worked enough backcountry deployments to know you planned for self-sufficiency regardless. The Hoh rainforest lived up to its reputation. Temperate rainforest, everything green and growing and wet. Sitka spruce trees 40 feet in circumference, western hemlock draped in moss like the forest was decomposing while still alive. The trail, barely maintained, more suggestion than path, disappeared under ferns and nurse logs within yards. Visibility maybe 50 feet before the green swallowed everything. Melissa found the tent at 11:47 hours, exactly where the dream had shown it. North face VE25, orange and black, set up properly in a clearing beside a creek she could hear but not see through the undergrowth. Her stomach clenched. Coincidence, had to be coincidence. She'd seen photos of Trevor's gear. Her brain had simply inserted accurate details into anxiety dream framework. Trevor? It's Melissa Rodriguez, NPS Wildlife Biology. You missed check-ins. I'm here to assist. No response. The tent fly was zipped closed. Rain pattered on nylon, on leaves, on the moss covering every surface. The temperature was maybe 45 degrees, but Melissa's breath misted like it was below freezing. She approached carefully, documenting with the Nikon. Tent showed no external damage, no signs of bear activity, no obvious trauma. Trevor's backpack leaned against a tree, bear canister sealed. His boots sat outside the tent vestibule, laces still tied. He'd been barefoot when the woman... Melissa stopped that thought. The dream wasn't real, wasn't prophetic. Was her brain generating worst-case scenarios based on incomplete data? She opened the tent fly. Trevor Adams lay in his sleeping bag, exactly as the dream had shown. Body positioned wrong. Spine bent backward at an angle human spines didn't achieve naturally. Neck twisted. Face locked in expression of terminal horror. Eyes open, staring at nothing. Dead for at least 48 hours based on lividity and the early stages of decomposition, though the cold was slowing putrefaction. Melissa's training took over. Document scene. Photograph from multiple angles. Check for obvious cause of death. No visible wounds, no blood, no signs of animal attack. Note environmental conditions, time of discovery, GPS coordinates. Call dispatch with casualty report. Her radio produced only static. The GPS showed solid satellite lock but wouldn't communicate with the base station. Phone showed no signal. Expected this deep in the rainforest. She'd have to hike to higher ground for transmission. Standard procedure for backcountry incidents. Melissa noticed the journal when she moved to close Trevor's eyes. Field notebook, identical to her own, lying open beside his head. The handwriting was Trevor's. She'd seen enough of his data logs to recognize the precise block letters, but the content made her skin prickle. October 14th, 2009, 19:23 hours. She's standing outside the tent, has been for 6 hours, doesn't move, doesn't blink. Rain passes through her, but she stays dry. I tried to photograph her. Every frame shows empty forest. Tried to leave, walked for 3 hours, ended up back here. GPS says I traveled 8 miles north. The clearing says I never left. She's waiting for something. I think she's waiting for me to understand. October 15th, 03:44 hours. Can't sleep. When I close my eyes, I see what happened to her. Not told, shown. I'm inside her memory, experiencing her death. Japanese internment camp, 1943. She was 17. Guard named Adams, same surname as me, impossible coincidence, took her from the barracks. 3 months later, she was pregnant. They found her in the forest, hanging from a Sitka spruce. Baby died with her. No one was punished. No one remembered her name, but she remembers. She remembers everything. And she thinks I'm him, thinks I'm the guard. I showed her my ID, my credentials, tried to explain I'm not related, I'm not him. She doesn't care, she doesn't speak. She just waits. October 15th, 17:56 hours. Tried to run, got 3 miles. Blinked, and I was back at the tent. She was inside this time, sitting across from me. Hair covering her face, but I can feel her looking, feel her remembering. My family name is Adams, that's enough. She doesn't want justice. Justice is impossible. She wants completion. 7 men violated her. 6 died over the decades, accidents that weren't accidents. I'm the 7th. Not the 7th man, the 7th Adams, 7th bearer of the name, Seventh link in the chain. The revenge doesn't end. It just finds new targets, new generations. October 16th, 02:11 hours. She's inside the tent now, arms reach away. I can see through her hair to what used to be her face. It's not blank, it's been removed. Not violently, carefully, methodically. The way you remove something you don't want to see in a mirror. She's reaching for me. I can't move. Paralyzed like in sleep paralysis, but I'm awake. The entry ended there. Melissa's hands shook, turning pages. More writing, increasingly illegible, transitioning from English to something else. Japanese characters maybe, though Melissa didn't read Japanese and Trevor didn't speak it. The final pages showed only drawings. A woman in white, a noose, a tree, 7 names written and crossed out. Thomas Adams, 1943, the guard. Richard Adams, 1967, accident. David Adams, 1982, suicide. Peter Adams, 1995, disappeared. Stephen Adams, 2001, heart attack, age 34. Jonathan Adams, 2006, drowning. Trevor Adams, 2009. Melissa forced herself to breathe. This was data. Disturbing data, but analyzable. Trevor had clearly experienced some kind of psychological break, possibly hypothermia-induced hallucination, constructing elaborate paranoid narrative around coincidental surname. The Japanese internment camp connection was real. There'd been a facility near Lake Crescent during World War II, but the rest was trauma brain-generating meaning from chaos. She photographed every page of the journal. Evidence for the incident report, for the psychological autopsy that would follow. Then she checked Trevor's body more carefully for actual cause of death. The spine wasn't just bent, it was broken in 3 places. Vertebrae crushed with force that should have required industrial equipment. No external bruising, no fractures to limbs or skull. Just impossible internal trauma that suggested something had grabbed him and folded him like origami. Melissa's scientific mind offered explanations. Seizure causing muscular contractions strong enough to fracture bone, documented in extreme cases. Except the break patterns were wrong, the force vectors inconsistent with muscle action. She photographed everything anyway, noting each anomaly. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in 5 seconds. Not gradual, instantaneous. Melissa's breath went from invisible to thick fog mid-exhale. The rain didn't stop but began freezing on contact, coating the tent in ice that shouldn't form at 45 degrees ambient temperature. She looked up. The woman from her dream stood at the tent entrance. White kimono soaked through but somehow not dripping. Long black hair covering her face. Body perfectly still in a way that living bodies couldn't achieve. The air around her rippled like heat shimmer in reverse, cold radiating invisible waves. Melissa's training provided framework. Hallucination from stress, grief, hypothermia setting in faster than expected. She wasn't really seeing this. Her brain was pattern matching against the dream imagery, constructing sensory experience from expectation. Not real. The woman moved, not walked, relocated, occupying one position then another with no transition between. Now kneeling beside Trevor's body. Now reaching toward Melissa with hands that had too many joints in the fingers. Melissa scrambled backward, hit the tent wall, fell through the nylon like it wasn't there and into the forest beyond. She landed in ferns, mud soaking through her rain gear, and when she looked back, the tent was empty. No woman, no Trevor, just empty space where the tent had been. The GPS showed she'd moved 80 yards east, but she'd just fallen, hadn't walked. The clearing was visible through the trees, orange tent clearly present. Melissa stood, checked herself for injury. None. Checked her GPS against landmarks, position accurate. Checked her perception against rational framework, failing completely. She walked back to the tent. Trevor's body was there, the journal was there, the woman was gone. Melissa's scientific mind tried to process. Grief hallucination, PTSD flashback, something explainable. But the frozen rain coating everything hadn't melted, still glittered with ice crystals that violated every thermodynamic law. Her radio crackled to life. Not dispatch. Trevor's voice, perfect clarity. She doesn't want you, wrong name. Rodriguez isn't Adams, you're just witness, just documentation. But you have to understand what happened, have to complete the observation. Scientific method, right? Form hypothesis, gather data, reach conclusion. Your hypothesis is wrong, Melissa. Time to gather new data. The transmission ended in static. Melissa checked the radio. Definitely Trevor's frequency. Definitely his voice. Definitely impossible because Trevor was dead in the tent with his spine broken in 3 places. She ran. The forest swallowed her. Sitka spruce and western hemlock, ferns and moss and deadfall, everything green and wet and wrong. Melissa's GPS tracked her movement. North, steady pace, mile accumulated on the display. But when she looked back, the tent was still visible 50 yards away. Close as when she'd started running. She stopped. Checked the GPS. It showed 1.4 miles traveled. Looked at the tent. Same 50 yards. This isn't possible, Melissa said aloud. Scientific fact, grounding statement. Distance is objective. GPS triangulation doesn't lie. Either I moved or I didn't. Trevor's journal had described the same phenomenon. Walking for hours, ending up exactly where he'd started. Melissa's rational mind offered explanation. Disorientation in dense forest, circling without realizing, GPS malfunction. But the track log showed straight line north, and she'd been following compass bearing, and the tent remained impossibly close. She tried again. Walked south this time, away from the tent, maintaining bearing, checking GPS every 30 seconds. Distance accumulated, 0.3 miles, 0.6 miles, 1.1 miles. She looked back. The tent was 30 yards away, closer than before. Melissa's hands found her field notebook, pen. Documentation. If her perception was failing, if something was wrong with her cognition, at least she could record symptoms. Scientific method. Observe, record, analyze. She wrote, 1,423 hours, spatial anomaly. GPS indicates travel distance inconsistent with visual observation. Tent appears stationary relative to my position despite recorded movement. Hypothesis, equipment malfunction. Test, manual distance measurement using pace count. She paced north, 200 steps, roughly 500 feet accounting for terrain. Turned around. The tent was directly behind her, 10 feet away. She was inside it. Trevor's body lay beside her, spine bent wrong, eyes staring. How? She'd just been outside, had walked away, had... The journal lay open to a new page. Melissa's handwriting, her field notebook. But she hadn't written this. You're experiencing non-linear time. She controls the space here, makes it loop, makes it repeat. You can't leave because you haven't arrived yet. You can't arrive because you haven't left yet. Causality is suggestion, not law. Welcome to what I learned. Melissa dropped the notebook. Not her handwriting, after all, she could see now. Similar, but different. Trevor's handwriting imitating hers, or her brain interpreting his handwriting as hers, or time was actually non-linear, and she'd written this in a future that was also past. Her phone rang. iPhone 3GS. No signal, but ringing anyway. The caller ID showed her own number. She answered. Don't go to the hanging tree, her voice said from the speaker. Future Melissa or past Melissa or hallucination Melissa, impossible to know. You'll want to investigate. You'll want data about the original incident. The tree is marked in Trevor's journal, pages 37 through 40. GPS coordinates that lead exactly where she died. Don't go. Documentation isn't worth it. Some observations change the observer. This isn't real, Melissa said to herself, to the phone, to the rain. Psychotic break? Hypothermia? Something explainable. You're still trying to rationalize, her voice answered. Still looking for framework. There isn't one. She exists outside your models, outside your data. You can measure her effects but not her cause, can document the phenomenon but not explain it. That's the horror, Melissa. Not that she's impossible. That impossibility is real. The call ended. The phone screen showed the conversation in the call log. Duration 4 minutes, 17 seconds. Her own number. Conversation with herself. Melissa's scientific training was comprehensive. She knew about grief-induced psychosis, knew about hypothermia's effects on cognition, knew about temporal lobe seizures creating false memories and prophetic sensations. This fit several diagnostic criteria. If she could just reach extraction point, get medical attention, the hallucinations would resolve under proper treatment. She checked her GPS for the extraction coordinates. 2 miles northwest, elevation gain of 800 feet, achievable in 90 minutes accounting for terrain. She started walking. The woman in white stood on the trail ahead. Not blocking it, just present. Melissa stopped, breath fogging despite her jacket being rated to 20 degrees and the temperature being objectively above freezing. "You're not real," Melissa said. "Your grief and stress, and my brain pattern matching against cultural imagery I've encountered subconsciously." The woman's hair moved, not like wind was blowing it, but like it was alive, reaching. Beneath the black strands, Melissa caught a glimpse of what had been face. Trevor's journal was right. It wasn't blank, it had been removed. Systematically, carefully, the way you destroy something you can't bear to see. Melissa tried to step around her. The woman's hand shot out, faster than eyes could track, fingers wrapping around Melissa's wrist. The touch was cold beyond temperature, beyond physics. A cold that felt like it was erasing warmth from existence rather than merely absent of heat. Vision slammed into Melissa's consciousness. She was 17. The guard's name was Thomas Adams. He came to the barracks after lights out, hand over her mouth, weight crushing her into the thin mattress. Nobody helped. Nobody acknowledged. 3 months later, she was visibly pregnant, unmarriageable, shameful. Her father wouldn't look at her. Her mother wept. The forest seemed like mercy compared to the camp, the shame, the child growing inside her from violation. The Sitka spruce was ancient. The rope was regulation camp property. She tied the noose carefully because she'd been raised to do things correctly even when the thing being done was ending her life. The drop was insufficient. She hung for 12 minutes, choking, clawing at the rope, baby kicking inside her while consciousness faded and the forest watched and nobody came because nobody cared about one more dead internment prisoner. But death wasn't ending. Death was beginning of waiting, beginning of remembering, beginning of counting years until the name Adams appeared again, until she could reach out from the space she occupied that wasn't quite death and wasn't quite life and exact the payment the world had refused to demand. Melissa snapped back to present, gasping, the woman's hand still on her wrist. The vision had felt absolutely real, not imagined, experienced. Memory transfer, consciousness invasion, something impossible that happened anyway. "I'm sorry," Melissa heard herself say. "What happened to you was wrong. What he did was monstrous, but Trevor wasn't him. I'm not him. We're not responsible for—" The woman's other hand came up, touched Melissa's forehead with one elongated finger. Different vision, different perspective. Melissa was watching herself from outside, seeing her body jerk as the woman touched her, seeing the exact moment her expression changed from fear to understanding to terminal horror. Seeing herself collapse, seeing Trevor's journal fall open to a page that hadn't existed before. Melissa Rodriguez, 2009. Wrong name, wrong target, but necessary witness. She has to understand that some debts transcend generations, that some violations don't end, that justice delayed isn't justice denied, it's justice patient. 7 Adams have paid, 7 generations. The cycle completes with Trevor, but the forest remembers everyone who enters, everyone who sees, everyone who tries to explain away what they can't understand. Melissa will leave, will file her report, will spend the rest of her life trying to rationalize what she witnessed. That's her punishment, not death. Knowing that impossible things are real. Melissa came back to herself on her knees in the mud, the woman gone, October rain falling normally. Her wrist burned where the touch had been, Skin showing frostbite damage that medical science would later be unable to explain given the ambient temperature. She was holding Trevor's journal. She'd never picked it up, had left it in the tent. But here it was, open to page 37, showing GPS coordinates for the hanging tree. Her scientific mind made decision before her conscious mind could interfere. Document the coordinates, investigate the original site, gather complete data. Understanding required evidence. Explanation required observation. She hiked northwest. The GPS guided her through old-growth forest to a clearing she hadn't seen on any maps. The Sitka spruce was massive, easily 500 years old. High on the trunk, ancient rope still hung, weathered nearly to dissolution but present. Beneath it, barely visible through moss, 7 wooden markers, names carved in English and Japanese. Akiko Tanaka, 1943, Thomas Adams, 1943, marked with different symbol. The perpetrator, Richard Adams, 1967, David Adams, 1982, Peter Adams, 1995, Stephen Adams, 2001, Jonathan Adams, 2006, Trevor Adams, 2009. Melissa photographed everything. Evidence, data, proof that this was real, that the pattern existed, that 7 people named Adams had died across 66 years in circumstances that official records would show as accidents or natural causes or simple bad luck. Her phone buzzed. Text message from her own number. "You came anyway, I told you not to. Documentation isn't worth it. Now you know. Now you'll always know. That's the real horror." She looked at her sent messages. Found the text she'd apparently sent herself from a time that hadn't happened yet, or had already happened or was happening simultaneously. "Don't go to the hanging tree. You'll want data. Don't." Some observations changed the observer. Time was non-linear here. The woman had shown her that. Past and future collapsed into present. Causality became suggestion, and Melissa's rational framework shattered like glass against stone. She found the 8th marker as rain intensified. Fresh wood, recently carved. Melissa Rodriguez, 2009. Her name, her year, but she wasn't dead, wasn't even injured. The woman had said wrong name, not a target, only a witness. Melissa heard the snap behind her, wood breaking, rope finally giving way after 66 years. She turned. The woman hung from the tree, fresh rope around her neck, body swaying. Not dead, dying. Present tense. Melissa was watching the original death, the 1943 suicide, occurring simultaneously with 2009 eyes met hers through the hair, expression begging for help that came 66 years too late. Then the vision shifted. Melissa was in the barracks, was being held down. Was the woman experiencing the violation? Was Thomas Adams committing it? Was observer and victim and perpetrator all at once? Perspective fracturing across time and identity until she couldn't remember who she was supposed to be. She ran. This time the forest let her go. GPS tracking made sense. Distance accumulated proportionally. And after 2 miles of desperate flight, she reached the extraction point on schedule. The helicopter came at 1600 hours, pilot noting she looked shaken but otherwise fine. Melissa filed her report. Trevor Adams deceased. Cause of death undetermined pending autopsy. Possible spinal trauma from fall or seizure. Location showed no hazards. Body recovered for forensic examination. Standard incident documentation. The autopsy found the broken spine. Found no cause. Ruled it unexplained medical event. Trevor's journal was logged as evidence, but the pages about the woman, the visions, the time loops, those pages were blank when examined by other people. Only Melissa could see the writing. Only Melissa knew what had really happened. She tried to tell people, tried to explain the non-linear time, the vengeful spirit, the pattern of Adams' deaths spanning generations. Colleagues smiled patiently, suggested grief counseling, noted concern about her psychological state following traumatic discovery of a friend's body. Melissa stopped trying to convince anyone after 3 months. The data was there. The pattern was documented. 7 Adams across 66 years, all dead in October, all within 50 miles of the Hoh rainforest. But without witnesses who believed, without framework for impossible phenomena, the observation remained unexplainable. She left the Park Service, couldn't return to the Olympic Peninsula, couldn't be in forests without remembering the woman in white, the touch that brought visions, the knowledge that some violations create wounds that never heal across any number of generations. The frostbite on her wrist never healed either. Tissue damage consistent with exposure to temperatures below -50 Fahrenheit, except the recorded air temperature that day was 43 degrees. Doctors had no explanation. Melissa stopped asking for one. She dreams sometimes. Always the same dream. She's in the tent with Trevor watching the woman approach. But sometimes the perspective shifts, and she's the woman, reaching for Trevor, bending his spine backward, unable to stop because the violation demands payment, and payment must be extracted across 7 generations, and Melissa is witness to all of it, observer and observed simultaneously. She wakes from these dreams with her wrist burning, frostbite flaring, and her iPhone, upgraded now through several generations, showing text messages from her own number. You documented it. You have the data. You understand the phenomenon. But understanding doesn't mean you can explain it. Some observations change the observer. You're changed now. You know what's real beyond your models. That's your punishment, not death. Knowing. Sometimes Melissa still tries to write papers, tries to frame the Olympic Peninsula phenomenon in scientific language, tries to create framework for non-linear time and vengeful spirits and observations that violate causality. The documents always corrupt. Files become unreadable. Data vanishes from drives that shouldn't be able to fail. The woman doesn't want documentation, wants only for Melissa to know, personally and privately, that impossible things are real, that some debts transcend generations, that justice patient is still justice, that violations create wounds that exist outside of time, that bleed across decades, that demand payment in forms science can't measure. Melissa knows all this now, knows it with cellular certainty that her PhD can't rationalize away, knows it every time she looks at the frostbite scar, every time she dreams the non-linear dreams, every time she checks her phone and finds messages from herself, warning about futures that are also pasts. She knows. And knowing, without ability to explain or share or integrate into rational framework, is the real horror, not death. Knowing. The woman in white made sure of that. Hope you felt genuine terror. If you appreciate authentic horror rooted in real folklore, consider following for more stories. Which moment scared you most? Share your theory about what happened. The emergency radio transmission had been corrupted. That's what Brandon Clark told himself as he listened to the recording for the 7th time. Headphones pressed tight against his ears, trying to convince his rational mind that Harper Martinez's last words weren't what they sounded like. The first part was clear enough. This is Harper Martinez, day permit 3847, requesting immediate assistance at Hetch Hetchy North Rim, grid 379462, 1197871. I found the cairn. I found what they buried. And I think... Then static consumed her voice, but beneath the static, distinct and impossible to rationalize away, Brandon heard 3 things. Harper Martinez screaming, something else screaming in a language that might have been Romanian, and a third voice, male, ancient, hungry, saying his daughter's name. Lily Clark, it whispered through a century of death. Tell her father I'm coming home. Clark's hands trembled as he removed the headphones. The Yosemite dispatch office was empty at 11 p.m. Just him and the recording equipment and the growing certainty that Harper Martinez hadn't simply fallen from the Hetch Hetchy Rim or gotten lost in the backcountry. Something had taken her. Something that knew his daughter's name. His phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Chen, his neighbor who watched Lily on his overnight shifts. Lily's asleep. Had nightmares again, but settled down. Take your time. Nightmares. Lily had been having them for 3 weeks now, ever since the anniversary of her mother's death. Dreams about a man standing at her bedroom window, watching her. A man who smelled like wet earth and spoke in a language she didn't understand. Clark had assumed it was grief manifesting through her 8-year-old mind, trauma surfacing in the only way children knew how to process it. Now, hearing that voice on the recording saying his daughter's name, he wasn't so sure. Clark pulled up Harper Martinez's file on his computer. 26 years old, graduate student in anthropology from UC Berkeley, researching death practices of Eastern European immigrants in early 20th century California. She'd requested a research permit for the Hetch Hetchy area specifically, citing historical records of a workers' cemetery from the O'Shaughnessy Dam construction era, 1914 to 1923. The dam had been controversial, flooding the Hetch Hetchy Valley despite protests from John Muir and the Sierra Club. During construction, dozens of workers had died, accidents, disease, exposure. The official records said their bodies had been relocated before the flooding. But Harper's research proposal included references to incomplete exhumations and disputed burial sites. She'd been looking for graves, and apparently she'd found one. Clark forwarded the audio file to his supervisor's email with a subject line reading "Urgent Martinez SAR, possible foul play," then grabbed his go bag. His Garmin InReach GPS showed the coordinates Martinez had transmitted. North rim of Hetch Hetchy Reservoir, about 8 miles from the ranger station. Rough terrain, granite cliffs dropping 2,000 feet to the water. If she'd fallen, recovery would be difficult. If something else had happened. He didn't let himself finish that thought. Instead, he texted Mrs. Chen, "Emergency SAR call. Might not be back until morning. Please stay with Lily. Don't let her answer the door for anyone." Mrs. Chen's response came immediately. "Is everything okay?" Clark typed, "Yes," then deleted it, typed, "I hope so," and sent it before he could reconsider. The drive to Hetch Hetchy took 40 minutes on winding mountain roads, Clark's truck headlights cutting through darkness thick with October fog. The reservoir appeared as a vast black expanse, the drowned valley invisible beneath 300 feet of water. Somewhere down there, beneath the surface, was the original Hetch Hetchy. Meadows, waterfalls, granite formations that John Muir had called a grand landscape garden, one of nature's rarest and most precious mountain temples. And somewhere down there, if Harper's research was accurate, were graves that shouldn't exist. Clark parked at the trailhead and checked his equipment. Motorola APX radio with GPS integration, satellite phone first aid kit, rope, headlamp, emergency beacon. And because he couldn't shake the feeling that normal equipment wouldn't be enough, he added items that would get him laughed out of any CR briefing. A crucifix his late wife had worn. Not that he believed, but she had. Salt. No idea why, just instinct. And the Glock 22 he wasn't supposed to carry on routine searches. The trail to the north rim was steep, gaining 1,800 feet in 3 miles. Clark's headlamp illuminated ancient granite and manzanita bushes, the beam catching occasional reflections from animal eyes, deer, possibly coyote. But no human sounds, no response to his calls of "Harper Martinez, Park Service SAR, if you can hear me, respond." Just the wind through pine trees and the distant sound of water against rock. He reached the rim coordinates at 1:23 a.m. His headlamp revealed a small clearing on a granite outcropping, with the reservoir spreading dark and silent 2,000 feet below. Harper Martinez's day pack sat against a rock, neatly arranged, the way someone might set it down intending to return. Her GoPro camera was still attached to the pack's shoulder strap, red recording light dark. Clark photographed the scene, then carefully examined the pack. Water bottle half full, trail mix, notebook filled with research notes in small, precise handwriting. The last entry was dated today, time stamped 4:47 p.m. Found it. The cairn is exactly where the 1923 surveyor's notes indicated, 37.9462, 119.7871. Stones arranged in Eastern European pattern, specifically Romanian Transylvanian. Engravings match protective symbols against strigoi, vampire, revenant, which means they knew what they were burying. They knew it wasn't a normal death. Question: if these are protective symbols, why place them on top of the grave? Unless they weren't trying to keep people out. They were trying to keep something in, need to excavate, need to see what... The entry ended mid-sentence, the pen trailing off the page. Clark turned slowly, scanning the clearing with his headlamp. 20 feet from the pack, partially hidden by scrub oak, he saw the cairn, a mound of carefully stacked stones, each rock placed with obvious intention, the pile forming a rough rectangular shape about 6 feet long and 3 feet wide. Grave-sized, and the stones had been disturbed. Recently, someone had pulled away the top layers, exposing a gap in the center where darkness gaped like a mouth. Clark approached slowly, every instinct screaming at him to retreat, call for backup, wait for daylight and proper authorities. But Harper Martinez was missing, and his daughter's name had been spoken by something on that corrupted recording, and he couldn't shake the certainty that time mattered here. He knelt beside the cairn and pointed his headlamp into the gap. The beam revealed more stones beneath, and below those, fragments of wood, a coffin, collapsed from age and moisture. And within the coffin remains, glimpsed through gaps in the wood. Fabric, possibly burial clothing, pale shapes that might be bones, and something else, something that made Clark's throat constrict with irrational terror. The fabric was moving, not wind. There was no wind down in the cairn, but slow, rhythmic movement, like breathing. Clark jerked backward, his hand instinctively going to the Glock on his belt. "Harper Martinez? Are you down there?" No response. Just that slow, rhythmic movement, and now Clark could hear it. A wet, rasping sound, like damaged lungs trying to draw air through fluid-filled passages. His radio crackled with static, and through the static came Harper Martinez's voice. "Brandon. Brandon Clark. It knows your name because I told it. It wanted to know who would come looking for me. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. It showed me things, promised things. Reunion with lost loved ones, communication with the dead, answers about what comes after. I just had to help it get out. Had to remove enough stones for it to squeeze through. And it did. It got out. And now it's... Where are you?" Clark demanded into the radio. "Martinez, what's your location?" "It's wearing me," Harper's voice said. But the tone was wrong now, layered with something else beneath it. Just like it wore the construction worker in 1923, wore him until the others realized and killed them both. Buried them together. But it's stronger now. Fed on me. Learned from me. And I told it about you. About your daughter. About how you're all alone since your wife died. It liked that. Loved ones, Mr. Clark, are leverage. The voice that had been Harper's dissolved into something else. Male, thick with an accent that might have been Romanian, resonant with malice. "I know how you suffer, Brandon Clark. I know the emptiness since your Elena died. 3 years you grieve, raise your Lily alone, push away everyone who tries to help. Such familiar pain. I was widower also once. Came to America for new life. Died building dam for rich men. Buried in this mountain far from home. But death is not the end. Death is transformation. And I have learned many transformations." Clark was backing away from the cairn now, his headlamp beam swinging wildly across the clearing. Movement in the periphery. Something rising from behind a rock. Something wearing the shape of Harper Martinez but moving wrong. Joints articulating at impossible angles, skin pulled too tight over a frame that was too large for it. "I took the girl's knowledge," the thing said in that layered voice. "Took her memories, her language, her understanding of this modern world. Useful. But I hunger for more than knowledge. I hunger for life. Warm blood, beating heart, breath in lungs. And your Lily. Such young blood, such innocent heart. She will sustain me for decades." Clark drew the Glock, hand steady despite the terror flooding his system. "Stay away from my daughter." The Harper thing laughed, and the sound echoed wrong in the mountain air, reverberating with harmonics that shouldn't exist. "You think to threaten Strigoi with gun? I was killed before, buried with iron spikes through heart, blessed with priests' prayers, sealed with protective symbols. Yet here I stand. Death cannot hold what refuses to die." It moved toward him with that wrong articulation, and Clark fired. 3 shots, center mass, exactly as trained. The rounds struck the Harper thing and passed through as if through mist, the body rippling where they entered but showing no real damage. Iron and lead, it said, still advancing. Americans love their guns. But this is not enemy you can shoot. This is ancient enemy. This is hunger that transcends flesh. Clark ran. He crashed down the trail, headlamp beam bouncing, his radio squawking static in that terrible layered voice. Run home to Lily, Brandon Clark. Run fast. But I am faster. I am already there. His satellite phone had signal, barely. He dialed Mrs. Chen, hands shaking so badly he nearly dropped the phone. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Hello? Mrs. Chen's voice groggy with sleep. Mrs. Chen, listen to me very carefully, Clark said, still running. Lock all the doors and windows. Do not let anyone in. Do not let Lily out of your sight. I'm calling the police right now. They'll be there in 10 minutes. Don't open the door for anyone except uniformed police with ID. Do you understand? Brandon, you're scaring me. What's happening? Just please do what I'm asking. I'll explain everything, but right now I need you to... The call dropped. No signal. Clark was in one of the valleys, granite walls blocking satellite line of sight. He kept running, pushing his 42-year-old body harder than he'd pushed it since the army, lungs burning, legs screaming. His radio crackled again. Such love for your daughter. I remember such love. My wife, my Elena. Yes, same name as yours, curious coincidence. She died of typhoid while I worked on this dam. I begged Foreman for time to go to her to say goodbye. He refused. She died alone while I drilled holes in mountain. When I died, falling from scaffold 3 weeks later, I welcomed death. Thought I would see her again. But dead is just empty, cold, aware but powerless. Until I learned the old ways, the ways my grandmother had whispered about. Transformation, hunger, return. Clark reached his truck at 2:47 a.m. His hands fumbled the keys, nearly dropped them. He started the engine, gunned it toward the park exit and the highway beyond. Cell signal returned as he cleared the mountain pass. He called 911, explained there was a threat to his daughter, gave his address in Mariposa, demanded immediate police response. The dispatcher tried to ask questions, but Clark hung up and floored the accelerator, his truck hitting 80 on the winding mountain roads. Please, he thought. Please let them get there in time. Please let Lily be okay. Elena, if you can hear me, if there's anything after death, protect our daughter. Please. The drive to Mariposa took 35 minutes that felt like hours. Clark saw police lights outside his house as he screeched to a stop. 2 sheriff's deputies on his porch. Mrs. Chen standing in the doorway looking confused and frightened. Clark nearly fell getting out of his truck. Ran to Mrs. Chen. Is Lily okay? Where is she? She's asleep upstairs, Mrs. Chen said. Brandon, what is going on? These officers said you called about a threat. Clark pushed past her, took the stairs 3 at a time. Lily's bedroom door was closed. He opened it carefully, quietly, and saw her small form in bed. Blonde hair spread across the pillow, breathing steady and normal. Asleep. Safe. He sagged against the doorframe, relief flooding through him so intensely he thought he might collapse. Safe. She was safe. Mr. Clark? One of the deputies had followed him upstairs. Sir, we need you to explain the nature of the threat. You told dispatch someone was targeting your daughter. How did he explain? How did he tell 2 rational law enforcement officers that a Romanian Strigoi wearing the skin of a missing anthropologist had threatened his 8-year-old daughter? They'd think he'd lost his mind, possibly call Child Protective Services. There was a situation during a search and rescue, Clark said carefully. The missing person, Harper Martinez, she'd been researching something dangerous. I think she encountered someone, and that someone knew about me, knew about my daughter. I was worried they might come here. Do you have a description of this person? No, I have a recording from Martinez's emergency transmission, but it's corrupted. My supervisor has it. But I thought I heard. How did he finish that sentence? The deputy looked skeptical, but professional. We'll file a report. We'll also increase patrols in this neighborhood for the next few days, but Mr. Clark, if you don't have specific information about a threat... I know how this sounds, Clark said, but something happened out there tonight. Something wrong. And Harper Martinez is still missing, possibly dead, and I needed to make sure my daughter was safe. The deputies left after 20 minutes, promising enhanced patrols and a follow-up visit in the morning. Mrs. Chen left shortly after, still confused but sympathetic. Clark sat in Lily's room watching her sleep, his Glock on his lap, waiting for dawn. At 4:32 a.m., Lily's eyes opened. She looked directly at him, face expressionless, and said in a voice that wasn't hers, "You cannot protect what I have already claimed." Then she blinked, confusion crossing her features, and she was Lily again. "Daddy? Why are you in my room? Did I have nightmares again?" Clark's hands tightened on the Glock. "Sweetheart, did you just say something before you woke up?" "I don't think so," Lily said, yawning. "I was dreaming about the man at the window. He said he was coming inside soon. He said he knew you, that you worked together or something. He seemed nice." "What did he look like?" "Old. Like, really old, but also not. Like he was pretending to be old, but he was really something else. And he smelled funny. Like dirt and water. Can I go back to sleep?" "Of course, honey," Clark said, his voice remarkably steady. "I'll be right here. I'm not going anywhere." Lily curled back under her blankets, asleep within minutes. Clark sat in the chair by her bed, Glock loaded and ready, watching the window where gray dawn light was finally beginning to filter through. The Strigoi had touched his daughter somehow, spoken through her, marked her, and Clark understood with terrible clarity that running wouldn't help, hiding wouldn't help. This thing had fixated on Lily the way it had once fixated on Harper Martinez, and it wouldn't stop until it had what it wanted, which meant Clark had to stop it first. At 7 a.m., he called his supervisor, Chief Ranger Tom Braddock. Explained there had been an incident during the Martinez search, that he needed emergency leave for a family situation, that someone else should take over the case. Braddock tried to ask questions, but Clark hung up and started searching the internet. Strigoi mythology, Romanian vampire folklore, how to kill Strigoi, protection against revenants. The information was scattered across folklore websites, academic papers, horror enthusiast forums. But certain patterns emerged. Strigoi were dead but not gone. They retained intelligence and personality from life, but twisted by death and hunger. They could possess the living, speak through them, influence their dreams. They fed on blood but also on life force itself, draining victims slowly or quickly depending on need. Traditional methods of destruction, decapitation, followed by burning the head separately from the body, placing garlic in the mouth, reversing the burial, facing the body downwards so if it tried to dig out it would dig deeper. Driving stakes through the heart wasn't enough alone. The stake had to remain in place until the body decomposed completely. And crucially, Strigoi were bound to their burial sites. They could travel, could possess and influence, but their physical form, the revenant body, remained tied to where they were buried. Destroy the body. Destroy the Strigoi. Clark looked at his sleeping daughter, at her innocent face, and made a decision that would either save her or damn him. He was going back to that cairn. He was going to dig up whatever was in there, and he was going to destroy it. But first he needed help, and there was only one person he could think of who might possibly believe him. Father Miguel Rodriguez ran the Catholic Church in Mariposa, a small adobe building that served the town's largely Hispanic community. Clark had never attended. Elena had been the believer, not him, but he remembered Father Rodriguez from Elena's funeral. The priest had been kind, practical, and notably didn't talk about God's plan or better places or any of the platitudes that made grief harder. Clark found him in the church at 8:30 a.m., preparing for morning service. The priest looked up from his Bible as Clark entered, concern crossing his weathered face. "Mr. Clark, it's good to see you. How is Lily?" Clark struggled for words. "Father, I need to ask you something that's going to sound insane. In my experience, the questions that sound most insane are often the ones most worth asking." Clark took a breath. "Do you believe in evil? Not metaphorical evil, not the evil men do. Actual evil, supernatural evil." Father Rodriguez set down his Bible carefully. "I am a Catholic priest. I believe in demons. I believe in possession. I believe in spiritual warfare. So yes, I believe in supernatural evil. Why do you ask?" "Because I think my daughter has been marked by something. A strigoi, a Romanian revenant, and I think it's going to try to take her unless I stop it." Most people would have laughed or called for psychiatric help. Father Rodriguez just nodded slowly. "Tell me everything," Clark told him. "The recording, the cairn, the Harper thing, the voice speaking through Lily. All of it, expecting disbelief or skepticism or attempts to rationalize. Instead, Father Rodriguez said, "The church has protocols for this. Not common, not often used, but they exist. We'll need to perform a blessing on your home, a protective ritual around Lily. And then we'll need to deal with the source, the body in the cairn. You believe me?" "Mr. Clark, I've been a priest for 35 years. I've seen 3 possessions, 2 of which I witnessed personally during exorcisms. I've blessed homes where genuine evil resided. I've spoken with things that were not human and never had been. Your story doesn't sound insane to me. It sounds like a standard case of revenant attachment, rare but not unprecedented. Can you help me destroy it? I can bless you, protect you, provide the proper prayers and rituals, but the physical destruction, the digging, the desecration of remains, the burning, that you'll have to do. The church cannot officially sanction grave desecration, even of evil." "Unofficially?" Father Rodriguez smiled grimly. "Unofficially, I'll drive you there myself." They left at 10 a.m., after Father Rodriguez performed a blessing over Lily, who thought it was weird but neat, and Mrs. Chen's house, who thought it was sweet but unnecessary. Clark loaded his truck with equipment, shovels, pickaxes, accelerant, matches, salt, the crucifix, and at Father Rodriguez's insistence, a bottle of holy water and a vial of blessed oil. For anointing the body before destruction, the priest explained, "We're not monsters, Mr. Clark. Even evil deserves proper ritual in death." The drive back to Hetch Hetchy felt longer in daylight, every mile taking them closer to something Clark's rational mind still struggled to accept as real. But he thought of Lily's voice saying, "You cannot protect what I have already claimed," and pushed the truck faster. They reached the trailhead at 11:47 a.m. Father Rodriguez climbed out, stretched, and shouldered a pack containing his ritual items. He wore hiking boots and jeans under his clerical collar, practical clothing for spiritual warfare. "Ready?" Clark asked. "I've performed 3 exorcisms and witnessed evil that would break most minds," Father Rodriguez said. "But I've never faced a strigoi, so no, I'm not ready, but we're going anyway." The hike took 90 minutes, Clark setting a brutal pace despite the equipment weight. Father Rodriguez kept up remarkably well for a man in his 60s, his breathing steady, his hiking boots finding purchase on loose granite with practiced ease. The priest had mentioned growing up in the Sierra foothills, learning these mountains before he learned theology. "I've been preparing for this my entire priesthood," Father Rodriguez said during a brief water break. "Every exorcism, every blessing, every encounter with genuine evil. They were training for moments like this. The church doesn't advertise it, but we maintain protocols. Ancient protocols. Some dating back to the early Christian persecution, when our saints fought Roman demons and pagan spirits. The strigoi is just another name for the same hunger that's existed since humanity's beginning." Clark wiped sweat from his face, his garments showing they'd climbed nearly 2,000 vertical feet. "Do you think we can actually destroy it? Or are we just postponing the inevitable. I think, Father Rodriguez said carefully, that evil persists because good men do nothing. Your daughter's life is worth fighting for. Even if we only buy her 70 years of safety, that's 70 years of life, of joy, of love. That matters. That's worth any cost. They reached the clearing at 1:23 p.m., exactly 12 hours after Clark had first found the disturbed cairn. The precision of the timing felt significant, as if the location existed in its own temporal rhythm. In daylight, the scene looked different, less immediately threatening, more obviously archaeological. The cairn was clearly old, the stones weathered and lichen-covered, moss growing in the crevices between rocks. The construction showed deliberate patterning, stones arranged in specific geometric configurations that Father Rodriguez identified as protective wards from Eastern European tradition. This isn't just a grave, the priest said, examining the stone arrangements. This is a prison. Whoever buried this thing understood exactly what they were dealing with. They used sacred geometry, probably prayers in Romanian or Old Church Slavonic. This wasn't superstition. This was sophisticated spiritual engineering. Harper Martinez's pack was still there, though animals had gotten into it overnight, scattering contents across the granite. Her notebook lay open, pages fluttering in the mountain breeze. Clark retrieved it, read the final entries more carefully now. The symbols aren't just Romanian, they're specifically Transylvanian, from the Maramuresh region where Strigoi legends are strongest. This suggests the buried individual came from that area. Census records from O'Shaughnessy Dam construction show 3 workers from Maramuresh County between 1914 and 1923. One, Nicolae Popescu, died in a scaffold collapse in August 1923. His body was never sent home to Romania, unusual for the time when families typically paid for repatriation. Question: why wasn't he sent home? Answer: because his co-workers knew what he'd become. And near the pack, arranged in a way that definitely hadn't been there before, was a circle of small objects. Clark approached slowly and identified them. Children's toys. A doll, a small truck, a jump rope, a stuffed animal. All old, weathered, damaged by time and elements. Offerings, Father Rodriguez said quietly. From the families of previous victims, children it took over the decades. Mr. Clark, this thing has been hunting for a century. You might not be the first parent to try stopping it. Clark felt his stomach turn. What happened to them? If their children's toys are still here, they probably failed. They began digging. The cairn was deep, stones piled high, and it took 2 hours to remove enough to expose the collapsed coffin beneath. The wood was rotted, easily broken away, revealing the contents. A skeleton, definitely human, wearing the remains of early 20th century clothing, canvas work pants, a collarless shirt, heavy boots. The bones were wrong, though. Too many of them, arranged in ways that didn't match human anatomy. And intertwined with the human skeleton was something else. Smaller bones, possibly from animals, woven through the human remains like a second skeleton wrapping around the first. The construction worker and the Strigoi, Father Rodriguez said, buried together. The locals must have killed them both, tried to bind them together to prevent resurrection. Didn't work, Clark noted. Bindings weaken over time, especially when someone disturbs them. The priest pulled out his holy water. We need to separate the remains, anoint them individually, then burn them separately. Fire for the human, blessed fire for the Strigoi. We have to give the construction worker's soul release while destroying the entity that wore him. They worked carefully, Clark handling the physical separation while Father Rodriguez prayed in Latin, sprinkling holy water over both sets of remains. As they worked, the temperature dropped noticeably, cold air rising from the grave despite the afternoon sun. And Clark heard her voice. Not Harper's this time, but Elena's. His wife, dead 3 years, speaking with perfect clarity. Brandon, stop. You're making a mistake. I'm here, I'm with you, I never left. The Strigoi taught me how to stay, I can come back. We can be a family again. Lily can have her mother. You don't have to be alone anymore. Clark's hands stilled on the bones, Elena's voice was exactly right. Every inflection perfect, saying the things he'd dreamed of hearing for 3 years. "Mr. Clark," Father Rodriguez said sharply, "that's not your wife. Your wife is at peace. This is deception." "But what if it's real?" Clark whispered. "What if there's a way?" "There isn't, and even if there was, it wouldn't be Elena. It would be something wearing Elena's memory, using your love as a weapon. You know this. Your daughter needs you present, not chasing ghosts." Clark squeezed his eyes shut, fighting the desperate hope that had surged at Elena's voice. "You're right. I know you're right." "Brandon," Elena's voice said again, sadder now. "Please. I'm so cold here. So alone. Let me come home." "You are home," Clark said, opening his eyes. "You're at peace, and I'm going to make sure nothing disturbs that peace ever again." He poured accelerant over both sets of remains, Father Rodriguez anointing them with blessed oil and praying. Then Clark struck a match and dropped it. The fire caught instantly, flames rising blue and white, burning hotter than accelerant alone should produce. The bones blackened, cracked, collapsed, and from the fire came screaming. Not Elena's voice now, but that male Romanian accented voice howling in rage and pain. "You think this ends me? I am already everywhere. In your daughter's dreams, in the water she drinks, in the air she breathes. You burned my anchor, but I remain. I will take her, Clark. Tonight, tomorrow, next week. I will take her and wear her, and you will watch helpless as I consume your last reason for living." The fire burned for 30 minutes, reducing bones to ash and ash to nothing. When it finally died, Clark and Father Rodriguez scattered the remains, mixing them with salt, burying them deep. Then they rebuilt the cairn, this time with proper blessing, Father Rodriguez marking each stone with holy water and prayers. "It's done," the priest said, finally exhausted. "The Strigoi's physical anchor is destroyed. Its power should be broken." "Should be?" "Evil is persistent, Mr. Clark. It finds ways. We've dealt with the body, but the entity itself, the hunger, the malice, that's harder to kill. Keep Lily blessed, keep her safe, and pray. That's all we can do." They hiked out as sunset painted the reservoir gold and red. Clark checked his phone obsessively. No messages from Mrs. Chen, which hopefully meant nothing was wrong. They reached the trailhead at 7:42 p.m., darkness falling fast. Clark's phone rang as he started his truck. "Mrs. Chen," her voice tight with fear. "Brandon, you need to come home right now. Something's wrong with Lily." His heart stopped. "What do you mean wrong?" "She won't wake up. She's breathing, but she won't wake up, and her skin is so cold, Brandon, she's so cold." Clark dropped the phone, gunned the engine. Father Rodriguez grabbed the door handle as the truck fishtailed out of the parking lot. "Go," he said. "Go fast." The drive took 25 minutes of controlled terror. Clark pushing the truck to its limits, running stop signs, hitting 90 on straight stretches. Father Rodriguez prayed the entire way, rapid Latin that sounded like both plea and command. They screeched to a stop outside Clark's house. The front door was open. Mrs. Chen must have left it that way in her panic. Clark ran inside, took the stairs, burst into Lily's room. His daughter lay in bed, covers pulled up to her chin, face pale as paper, eyes closed. Mrs. Chen stood beside the bed, crying. "I tried everything. I called 911, they're coming, but Brandon, she won't wake up." Clark checked Lily's pulse. Present but weak. Her breathing shallow. Her skin ice cold despite the warm room. This wasn't medical. This was supernatural. Father Rodriguez entered, already pulling items from his pack. Holy water, blessed oil, a small Bible. "Mr. Clark, I need you to hold her down. She's going to fight. She's unconscious. She won't be in a moment." The priest began prayers in Latin, sprinkling holy water over Lily's forehead. The effect was immediate. Lily's eyes snapped open, solid black from lid to lid, and she screamed in that layered voice. "Mine. She is mine. You burned my flesh, but I am in her blood now. In her breath, in her dreams. I have been feeding for 3 weeks, since the anniversary of the mother's death when the child's grief opened her. You are too late. Too late." Lily's small body convulsed with impossible strength. nearly breaking free from Clark's grip. Her back arched until her spine bent at an angle that should have broken it. Her fingers clawed at his arms with force that drew blood. Father Rodriguez pressed the Bible to her forehead, voice rising in volume, switching between Latin and English. "By the power of Christ, I command you to release this child. You have no claim here. You were not invited. You were not welcomed." "I was," the thing screamed through Lily's mouth, her voice layering with that ancient Romanian accent. She wished for her mother. She prayed every night for 3 years. "Please, God, bring Mommy back. I'll do anything. I'll be good forever. Just let me see her again." Such beautiful desperation. Such perfect invitation. And I came wearing Mother's voice, Mother's memory, Mother's love. The child opened every door, welcomed me into every corner of her spirit. She invited me in. Clark's vision blurred with tears, guilt crushing him. He'd been so focused on his own grief, his own pain, he hadn't seen how deeply Lily was suffering. Hadn't protected her from the predatory thing that heard a child's prayer and twisted it into access. "I'm sorry, Lily," he whispered, holding her thrashing body. "I'm so sorry I didn't see. I'm sorry I wasn't enough." "You were never enough," the Strigoi hissed. Single father, broken man, playing at strength while drowning in grief. The child needed her mother. I gave her that. Gave her dreams of Elena, memories of Elena, hope of Elena. Better than you gave her. Better than abandoning her to boarding schools and babysitters while you worked 70-hour weeks to avoid an empty house. The words cut because they were partially true. Clark had thrown himself into work after Elena died. Anything to avoid the silence of their home, the memories in every room. And Lily had suffered for it, grown quiet and withdrawn, her childhood stolen by loss. Clark felt his world cracking. Lily had wanted her mother so badly she'd opened herself to this. His beautiful, grieving daughter had been vulnerable, and this thing had exploited that. "Then I uninvite you," Clark said, his voice shaking. "As her father, as her guardian, as the person who loves her most in this world, I uninvite you. You are not welcome in my daughter. You are not welcome in my home. You are not welcome in any space where love exists. Get out." "Love?" The thing laughed. "Love is just fear of loss. Love is just hunger wearing a prettier name. I am hungry. You are hungry. We are the same." "We're not," Clark said, "because I would rather die than let my daughter suffer. Can you say the same? Did you ever love anything more than your own hunger?" For a moment, just a moment, the black in Lily's eyes flickered, and Clark saw his daughter looking out, terrified and trapped. Then Father Rodriguez anointed her forehead with blessed oil in the sign of the cross and shouted the final command. "In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, depart." Lily screamed, truly Lily this time, not the thing. And black smoke poured from her mouth, her nose, her ears coalescing into a vaguely humanoid shape that writhed and dissipated like fog in sunlight. The temperature in the room spiked 20 degrees in seconds. And then it was gone, truly gone, leaving only Lily sobbing in Clark's arms. "Daddy, it was inside me. I could feel it. I'm sorry. I just wanted Mom back. I'm sorry." "Shh, baby, it's okay. You're okay. It's gone now. I've got you. I've got you." Father Rodriguez sagged against the wall, exhausted. "It's done. The Strigoi is dispersed. Without its physical anchor and without permission to inhabit her, it couldn't maintain cohesion. Is it destroyed? Diminished. Scattered. It would take decades to reconstitute enough power to threaten anyone again. And by then, we'll all be gone. This fight is won, Mr. Clark. Your daughter is safe." The EMTs arrived 10 minutes later, checked Lily, found her vitals normal if weak. They attributed her condition to a severe fever that had broken, recommended hydration and rest, and left after 30 minutes. Mrs. Chen left shortly after, still confused but relieved Lily was okay. Father Rodriguez stayed until midnight, performing a final blessing over the house, leaving Clark with holy water and instructions for daily protection rituals. "Keep her close," he advised. "Trauma like this leaves scars. She'll need therapy, probably for years, and she'll need you to believe her when she talks about what she experienced." "I'll believe her," Clark promised. After tonight, I'll believe anything. After the priest left, Clark sat in Lily's room watching her sleep peacefully for the first time in weeks. No nightmares, no cold skin, just his daughter, breathing easily, alive and safe. His phone buzzed, a text from Chief Ranger Braddock. Harper Martinez's body recovered at base of Hetch Hetchy North Rim, appears to have fallen. Medical examiner ruling accidental death. Case closed. Take all the time you need for family leave. Clark stared at the text. Harper Martinez fallen. Her death ruled accidental. No mention of the cairn, the strigoi, the supernatural predator that had worn her and threatened his daughter. Just another statistic, another tragic accident in the wilderness. He thought about telling Braddock the truth, filing a report about what really happened, then thought better of it. Some truths were too dangerous to record. Some battles were fought in shadows and had to stay there. Instead, he texted back, "Thank you. We'll return when ready." He deleted the corrupted recording from his phone, deleted the photos of the cairn, deleted any evidence that might lead someone else to dig where they shouldn't, to disturb what should stay undisturbed. The Hetch Hetchy North Rim would be there forever, waiting. And somewhere in those mountains, scattered and weakened but not truly destroyed, the Strigoi's hunger remained. Maybe it would find someone else in 50 years. In 100, maybe it would reconstitute and hunt again, but not today, not his daughter, not while he drew breath. Clark pulled the covers up around Lily's shoulders, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "I've got you, baby. Always. Nothing's going to hurt you while I'm here." And for the first time since Elena's death 3 years ago, he felt like maybe that promise was one he could actually keep. Outside Lily's window, dawn was breaking over the Sierra Nevada, golden light touching granite peaks and ancient forests. The mountains were beautiful and terrible, holding secrets in their stone hearts, keeping watch over mysteries that predated human language. Brandon Clark, father and ranger, survivor and protector, watched the sunrise and made peace with the fact that the world was stranger and more dangerous than he'd ever imagined, and that love, real love, the kind that would burn ancient evil and tear apart reality itself to protect a child, was the only weapon that truly mattered. He would tell Lily everything someday when she was older. Tell her about her mother's voice used as a weapon, about the strigoi that had fed on her grief, about the battle fought for her soul. And he would teach her how to recognize evil, how to protect herself, how to be both kind and strong in a world where darkness wore friendly faces. But today he would just let her sleep. Let her be 8 years old and safe and loved. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new fears, new battles. Tomorrow. But not today. Today, his daughter was safe, and that was enough. Hope you felt genuine terror. If you appreciate authentic horror rooted in real folklore, consider following for more stories. Which moment scared you most? Share your theory about what happened to Harper. Daniel Freeman found the seventh shadow burned into the oak tree at 11:34 p.m. on October 31, 2008, and this time he was looking at it with someone who couldn't deny what it meant. Sheriff Ann Holloway stood beside him in the beam of his maglite, her weathered face pale as she studied the perfect silhouette scorched into the bark. Human-shaped, arms spread wide, mouth open in what might have been a scream, or might have been something worse. It matched the other 6 exactly. Same size, same pose, same impossible burn pattern that forensics couldn't explain, because fire didn't work like this, didn't leave negative space images without consuming the surrounding wood. "This is where Alexis Ford was last seen," Daniel said quietly. 48 hours ago. Witness said she walked toward the tree line and a shadow moved wrong, not with the light against it, and then she was gone. Daniel Freeman had spent 5 years as a National Park Service ranger at Great Smoky Mountains. After 2 tours in Afghanistan taught him that civilian life required structure and purpose, or the transition would kill him faster than any IED. At 6'3" and 220 pounds, most of it muscle memory from Marine training he'd never quite let go, Daniel was the ranger other rangers called when situations required physical presence. Bear encounters, violent domestic disputes at campgrounds, the occasional drunk hiker who thought rules didn't apply. Daniel handled it all with the same calm competence he'd used clearing buildings in Kandahar. But this was something his training hadn't covered. 7 people, Sheriff Holloway said, her voice tight. 7 people in 18 months, all disappeared during new moon phases, all leaving these. She gestured at the shadow burn, her hand shaking slightly. What the hell are we dealing with, Freeman? Daniel had been asking himself that question since the 3rd disappearance, when he'd first noticed the pattern everyone else seemed determined to ignore. The park saw 9 million visitors annually. People got lost constantly. Most were found, some weren't. It happened. But this was different. The first victim had been Marcus Chen, experienced hiker, last seen near Cades Cove in March 2007. Found his pack, his phone, his wallet. Found the shadow burned into a poplar tree where his girlfriend said he'd been standing when something moved in the corner of her eye and he just wasn't there anymore. Second victim, Emma Rodriguez, disappeared in June 2007 from the Alum Cave Trail. Different location, same shadow burn, same witness statement about movement and peripheral vision. Third, fourth, fifth, sixth, all following the pattern, always during new moon, always leaving the shadow burn, always with witnesses who couldn't quite explain what they'd seen because it happened in the edges of vision, in the spaces where attention didn't quite focus. And now Alexis Ford, 27 years old, wildlife photographer from Atlanta, camping alone near Cades Cove. Last seen by another camper at dusk on October 29th, walking toward the tree line to photograph deer. The camper had glanced away for literally 3 seconds, looked back, and Alexis was gone. No scream, no struggle, just absence where a person had been. I don't know what we're dealing with, Daniel admitted. But I know it's not natural. I know it's going to happen again unless we figure this out. And I know every law enforcement agency we've contacted thinks we're seeing patterns where none exist. Sheriff Holloway's jurisdiction technically ended at the park boundary, but she'd been involved since victim number 3, when Daniel had driven to her office in Townsend and laid out everything he'd found. She was maybe 60 years old, born and raised in these mountains, and unlike the federal investigators who'd briefly looked at the case, she didn't dismiss the shadow burns as coincidence or hoax. My grandmother used to tell stories, she said quietly, still staring at the burned silhouette. Cherokee legends about the Nunahai, spirit people who lived in these mountains. They'd appear sometimes to help lost travelers, or sometimes to lead them away, into the mists, into the places between. She shook her head. I always thought they were just stories, folklore to keep kids from wandering off alone. Daniel didn't believe in folklore, didn't believe in spirits or legends or anything that couldn't be explained by physics and biology. 2 tours in a combat zone had taught him that the most dangerous thing in the world was always another human being, and the most reliable tool was training and discipline and the willingness to use violence when necessary. But he also couldn't explain the shadow burns, couldn't explain how 7 people had vanished without trace except for these impossible images. Couldn't explain the growing feeling he'd had over the past 6 months that something was watching him when he investigated the sites. Something that existed just outside his ability to perceive it directly. I'm staying here tonight, Daniel said. Setting up trail cameras, motion sensors, the works. If something comes back, I want evidence. You think it comes back? I think this is the 8th tree. I think victim number 8 is coming. I think the pattern isn't finished yet. Sheriff Holloway studied him for a long moment. You want backup? Daniel thought about that. About whether bringing more people would help or just provide more targets. Yeah, he said finally. But stay in your vehicle. Stay where there's light. Don't let yourself get isolated in the dark. They set up a perimeter using Daniel's equipment. 4 trail cameras with motion activation and infrared capability, a portable motion sensor that would trigger an alarm on his Garmin GPS unit, and 2 high-powered LED floodlights powered by a generator. The sheriff parked her cruiser 50 feet from the marked tree, engine running, high beams illuminating the area like a stage set. Daniel took up position between the cameras and the tree, his service weapon holstered but accessible, his military-grade flashlight in one hand, his flip phone in the other, ready to document anything unusual. The fog was rolling in, typical for the Smokies, where weather could change from clear to zero visibility in minutes. And within an hour, Daniel was standing in a white wall that reduced the world to maybe 20 feet of visibility. The generator for the floodlights cut out at 1:47 a.m. Daniel's training kicked in immediately. Threat assessment, scanning for danger, hand moving to his weapon. The lights died simultaneously, plunging the area into darkness broken only by his flashlight and the sheriff's headlights behind him. "Holloway?" he called. "You see anything?" No response. Daniel's pulse elevated slightly. Not panic, just the body's natural response to potential threat, the way his nervous system had been trained to recognize danger and respond appropriately. He turned toward where the cruiser should be, where headlights should still be illuminating the fog. The headlights were gone. The cruiser was gone. Sheriff Holloway was gone. Impossible. She'd been right there, engine running, radio on. Daniel had looked away for maybe 15 seconds when the generator died, but the space where her vehicle had been was now just empty forest, fog swirling through trees that seemed taller than they'd been moments ago. Daniel's flashlight beam caught something in the mist. Movement. Not toward him or away, perpendicular to his line of sight, something passing between trees. Human-shaped but wrong, darker than the fog should allow, moving in a way that suggested it wasn't walking but gliding, like footage played at slightly wrong speed. He aimed his flashlight directly at it. The beam passed through where the figure should be, illuminating nothing, the light seeming to get swallowed by darkness that had no physical source. Daniel's rational mind insisted this was hallucination, exhaustion, the fog playing tricks. But his combat-trained instincts were screaming different warnings: ambush, threat from multiple vectors, retreat and regroup. He backed toward where the generator had been, intending to restart it, re-establish the lights. Found nothing. The generator was gone too. So were his trail cameras, his motion sensors, all his equipment. Just forest and fog and the growing certainty that something fundamental had gone wrong with reality in the last 3 minutes. Daniel pulled out his flip phone, Motorola Razr, state-of-the-art for 2008, and flipped it open. No signal, which wasn't surprising this deep in the park, but the screen showed something that made his skin prickle. The date read October 31st, 2008, 11:34 p.m., the same time he'd arrived at the tree with Sheriff Holloway, 2 hours ago, except his watch showed 1:52 a.m. Daniel checked his watch again. Digital display, military issue, reliable, still showing 1:52 a.m., November 1st. But his phone insisted it was 2 hours earlier, still Halloween. Peripheral movement again. Multiple figures now, circling, always just at the edge of his vision. When he turned his head to look directly, they vanished. When he looked away, they reappeared. Dark human-shaped silhouettes that existed only in the spaces his attention didn't cover. His training said fight or retreat. But fight what? How do you engage an enemy that exists only in peripheral vision, that vanishes when directly observed? Daniel tried his radio. Dead. Tried his GPS. The screen showed his position, but the coordinates were wrong, placing him 3 miles from where he actually stood. Tried walking back toward where his Jeep was parked, following the trail he'd used to reach this location. After 10 minutes of walking, he was back at the oak tree with the shadow burn. Impossible. He'd walked in a straight line, had followed terrain features, had used his compass. But he was back at the starting point, as if the forest had folded around him, as if the concept of a way had lost meaning. The figures in his peripheral vision were closer now. Daniel could hear them, or hear something. Not footsteps. More like the absence of sound. Dead spaces in the ambient noise where his ears insisted something existed, but couldn't identify what. He tried again. Walked in the opposite direction this time, marked his trail with reflective tape, counted his steps to ensure he was moving in a straight line. After 8 minutes, back at the oak tree. Daniel had seen a lot in Afghanistan, had experienced fear in its purest form, had learned to function through it, to let training override panic. But this was different. This was his understanding of reality coming apart, was the fundamental assumptions about cause and effect, and linear time proving unreliable. The shadow burn on the tree was changing. When Daniel had first arrived, hours ago or minutes ago, depending on which device he trusted, the silhouette had shown arms spread wide. Now the arms were lowered. Now the mouth looked less like screaming and more like laughing. Daniel's flashlight flickered. When it came back on, there were 8 shadow burns on the tree. Not 1. 8. All slightly different poses, all human-shaped, all looking like they'd been there for years despite 7 of them being impossible. One of the new silhouettes was wearing a Park Service uniform, was the right height and build to be Daniel Freeman. He touched his chest, his arms, confirming he was solid, was present, was still physically existing. But the shadow on the tree insisted otherwise. Insisted he was already one of the disappeared, already consumed by whatever existed in the spaces between perception. "This isn't real," Daniel said aloud, his voice steady despite his accelerating pulse. "PTSD episode, hallucination, not real." The figures in his peripheral vision stopped moving. And then, horrifyingly, they spoke. Not with voices, with the absence of voices, with silence shaped into words that Daniel heard directly in his auditory cortex. "Real is a category error. We exist in the spaces your neurology ignores, in the peripheral fields your brain discards, in the moments between attention and recognition. You cannot fight what you cannot fully perceive. You cannot escape what exists outside linear causation. You are already gone, Daniel Freeman. Have been gone since you arrived. Will be gone before you got here. Time is negotiable here. Reality is consensus, and the consensus is breaking." Daniel's Marine training provided no protocols for this. No combat manual covered reality-breaking entities that spoke in auditory hallucination and existed only in peripheral vision. But his training did provide something else: the ability to function through fear, to complete the mission, even when the mission made no sense. The mission was simple: understand what happened to Alexis Ford and the 6 others. Find them if possible. Stop it from happening again. Daniel pulled out his digital camera, separate device in 2008, before smartphones made dedicated cameras obsolete, and began photographing everything. The multiple shadow burns on the tree, the fog that moved wrong, the figures he could only see peripherally that showed up in photos as darker patches in already dark mist, human-shaped voids where light seemed to stop rather than scatter. The figures spoke again. "Documentation is meaningless. Your devices measure only one layer of reality. We exist in all of them simultaneously. The people you seek are here with us, are experiencing every moment of their disappearance eternally, are screaming and laughing and sleeping and dying across infinite instances. Time is a direction you move through. Time is an ocean we swim in. You cannot save them. You cannot save yourself. You can only choose which instance you wish to experience forever." The fog began to clear, not gradually, instantly, like a switch had been thrown. Daniel found himself standing in the exact same location, but it was now daylight. Bright noon sun, temperature comfortable, birds singing, everything normal. Except he was surrounded by people. Alexis Ford stood 20 feet away, holding her camera, looking confused. Beside her, the 6 previous victims: Marcus Chen, Emma Rodriguez, all of them looking disoriented but physically present, physically real. "Daniel," Alexis said, "how did you... we were just... I was photographing deer and then everything got weird. Repeating. I've lived the last 5 minutes maybe 1,000 times. Different each time but the same. Where are we?" Daniel approached slowly, his hand away from his weapon, his body language non-threatening. "Great Smoky Mountains, Cades Cove area. What's the last thing you remember before the loop started?" "Walking toward the tree line, sunset. Something moved wrong in my peripheral vision and then..." She gestured helplessly. This. Fragments. Moments that don't connect. Are you real? Am I real? I can't tell anymore. Marcus Chen spoke up, his voice shaking. I've been here for 18 months, or 18 seconds, or 18,000 years. Time doesn't work right. We see you arrive over and over, different ways each time. Sometimes you save us, sometimes you join us, sometimes you were never here at all. Daniel's tactical mind was trying to process this. 7 people, all present, all claiming to experience non-linear time, all trapped in some kind of loop or liminal space. Is there a way out? He asked. Emma Rodriguez laughed, the sound brittle. Out implies direction, implies a stable geography. This place, it's not a place. It's a fold in reality, a place where attention doesn't focus. The shadow people, that's what they are. Entities that exist in the blind spots of consciousness, and we're stuck here with them, in the blind spot, experiencing every possible timeline simultaneously. As if summoned by the name, the shadow people appeared, not in peripheral vision this time, directly visible now that Daniel was in their space rather than his own. They were humanoid but hollow, silhouettes with depth, 3-dimensional absences of light shaped like people but containing nothing, containing less than nothing, containing the active negation of existence. One of them approached Daniel. Didn't walk, transitioned, existing at different points in space without moving through the intervening distance. When it spoke, the words formed directly in Daniel's mind. You understand now. This is where we exist. Between the seconds. In the angles of perception your neurology smooths over. Humans see in narrow bandwidth, experience time as linear progression, exist in single instants. We exist in all the ignored spaces, all the dismissed moments. We are what you delete to maintain consensus reality. Why take people? Daniel demanded. Why trap them here? We don't take. You cross over. You step into the spaces between your attention, usually briefly. Usually you return before noticing. But sometimes, at specific lunar phases, at specific locations, when the boundary thins, you cross over and cannot find the way back. You become aware of us, and awareness here is permanent. You cannot unsee us, cannot return to the limited perception you left. The disappeared are not missing. They are perceiving too much. Daniel looked at Alexis, at the others. They seemed solid, real, present, but Marcus Chen flickered slightly, as if existing in multiple states simultaneously. Emma's edges were blurred, like a photograph taken with slow shutter speed. They were coming apart, fragmenting across whatever this space was. How do I get them out? Daniel asked. You don't. They are not out to be gotten. They exist here, exist there, exist in between. Consciousness is location, and their consciousness is now distributed across dimensional boundaries. You can join them. Can exist here consciously instead of disappearing into our blind spot. Or you can return to your limited perception and forget this ever happened. Forget them. Forget us. Forget that reality is consensus, and consensus is arbitrary. Daniel's military training insisted there was always a way, always an exit strategy, always a solution if you thought hard enough, fought hard enough, refused to accept defeat. But this wasn't combat. This wasn't even physics. This was something that existed outside the frameworks his entire worldview depended on. Show me, he said. Show me how this works. The shadow person didn't move, but suddenly, Daniel was seeing from its perspective, if perspective was the right word. He saw reality as layers, as overlapping instances, as probability clouds where single definite states were the exception, rather than the rule. He saw himself standing in the forest across 1,000 different timelines, where he arrived alone, where he arrived with backup, where he never arrived at all because he'd died in Afghanistan, where he'd never joined the Marines, where he'd never been born. He saw Alexis Ford existing in multiple states, alive, dead, disappeared, found, merged with the shadow people, escaped, trapped forever, all simultaneously true, all equally valid. all existing in the same space because space itself was a simplified model of something much more complex. And he saw the shadow people themselves, not as entities but as the spaces between entities, as the ignored background against which foreground reality played out, as the deleted data that made the signal comprehensible. They weren't malicious. They just existed in the gaps, and sometimes humans fell through the gaps and couldn't get out because getting out required not perceiving them, and once perceived, they couldn't be ignored. The vision ended. Daniel was back in his single perspective, his linear time, his limited bandwidth of perception, but he understood now. Understood that rescuing the disappeared wasn't possible because they weren't gone. They were experiencing too many places at once, too many times simultaneously, and returning to single-instance existence would require them to collapse back into one timeline, would require choosing which version of events was real, and deleting all the others. "There's a choice," the shadow person said. "You can take one instance, pull one version of these people back to your consensus reality, but doing so collapses all other versions, kills them across every other timeline, murders infinite instances of themselves to save one. Or you accept that they exist here, in superposition, alive in some timelines and dead in others and trapped in still more. And you return to your world with the knowledge that reality is not what you thought." Daniel looked at Alexis Ford, or one version of her, one instance selected from infinite possibilities. She looked back at him with eyes that showed too much understanding, that had seen across dimensional boundaries and couldn't unsee. "Don't," she said quietly. "Don't collapse me. I can feel all the other versions. In some of them I'm home, I'm safe. In some I'm dead, but it's peaceful. In some I'm here forever, but I'm not alone. If you pull one version back, you kill all the rest. You make one arbitrary instance real and delete everything else. I don't want that responsibility. Don't want to be the version that survived at the cost of infinite other selves." Marcus Chen nodded. "We're not suffering. Not exactly. We're experiencing everything. It's overwhelming, but it's also, we see so much more than we did. See how arbitrary reality is, how many versions of ourselves exist, how fragile the consensus is that makes any of it seem solid." Daniel's training said leave no one behind. His orders said investigate and rescue. His entire worldview said there was right and wrong, success and failure, mission accomplished or mission failed. But this wasn't a binary situation. This was something his frameworks couldn't process. "What happens to me?" Daniel asked. "I've seen you now, seen this. Can I go back?" "You are already back," the shadow person said. "This conversation is happening in the space between your decision to investigate and the moment you'll forget investigating. You'll return to your timeline with no conscious memory of us. We'll file a report saying you found nothing. We'll slowly forget the victims. We'll eventually convince yourself this never happened." "No," Daniel said firmly. "I won't forget. You will. You must. Human neurology cannot maintain awareness of us and function in consensus reality simultaneously. You will remember for hours, then minutes. Then you'll remember that you forgot something important. Then you'll forget that you forgot. Then we'll be gone from your conscious access. We'll exist in your blind spot again. And when you arrive at this tree in 2 hours, because time is flexible here, you'll investigate the shadow burn and find nothing and file your report and move on." Daniel felt it happening even as the shadow person spoke. The memories were already becoming slippery, hard to grasp, like trying to remember a dream after waking. Alexis's face was blurring. The shadow people were fading back into peripheral vision. The daylight was dimming. He grabbed his camera, took more photos, physical evidence. Something to anchor the memories when his neurology deleted them. The shadow person that might have been amused. "Your devices will show only fog and trees. The images exist in your perception only. When you return to single-instance consciousness, they'll revert to standard documentation of empty forest." Daniel checked his camera's display screen. Empty forest. Fog. No people. No shadow entities. Just normal landscape photography of normal woods. You cannot document what exists outside your perceptual bandwidth. The shadow person continued. Cannot prove what you're about to forget. Cannot save what doesn't need saving. The disappeared are fine. Better than fine. They exist in expanded consciousness now. They see more than you can imagine. They would not return to your limited existence even if offered. Is this real? Daniel asked. Last question before the memory deletion took hold. Real is consensus. You're asking if this matches your consensus reality. No, it doesn't. But your consensus reality is a shared hallucination, an agreed-upon deletion of infinite complexity to maintain functional sanity. This is what exists when consensus breaks. Is it more real? Less real? The question assumes reality is binary. It isn't. The fog was returning. The daylight was fading. Daniel could feel himself transitioning back to his original timeline, could feel the memories compressing, could feel his neurology doing what it was designed to do: delete the overwhelming data, maintain the simple story, preserve the functional narrative. He tried to hold on to the important part. Alexis Ford is okay. All of them are okay. They're experiencing something we can't understand, but they're not suffering. Mission accomplished in a way that doesn't map to mission parameters, but is still somehow success. The memory slipped further. What had he been trying to remember? Something about the victims being okay? But that didn't make sense. They were gone. Disappeared. That's why he was investigating. He was standing at the oak tree with the shadow burn. His watch showed 11:47 p.m., October 31st, 2008. His phone showed 11:47 p.m. Sheriff Holloway stood beside him, her face pale as she studied the silhouette burned into the bark. This is where Alexis Ford was last seen, Daniel said. Had said? Was about to say? His mouth was forming words he couldn't quite remember deciding to speak. 48 hours ago. Witness said she walked toward the tree line and a shadow moved wrong, not with the light, against it, and then she was gone. Had this conversation already happened? Daniel felt a bizarre sense of déjà vu, like he'd lived this moment before. But that was impossible. He'd just arrived, hadn't he? Sheriff Holloway was talking about Cherokee legends, about Nunahai, about spirit people. Daniel tried to focus, but his attention kept sliding away, like trying to remember something on the tip of his tongue. They set up equipment. Trail cameras, motion sensors, lights. The sheriff parked her cruiser, kept the engine running, maintained the lights. Daniel took up position and waited. The fog rolled in. The generator cut out at 1:47 a.m. He turned to check on the sheriff and she was there, engine running, lights on, everything normal. He'd just checked 2 minutes ago. Why had he thought she'd disappeared? The generator restarted on its own, probably just a fuel flow issue. Daniel made a mental note to get it serviced. Nothing happened for the rest of the night. No shadow people, no disappearing, no reality fragmentation, just a normal stakeout that produced no results. At dawn, Daniel packed up his equipment. Sheriff Holloway looked exhausted but relieved that nothing had occurred. Maybe the pattern is broken, she suggested. Maybe whatever was happening has stopped. Daniel nodded, but something felt wrong. Felt like he was forgetting something crucial. Had he dozed off at some point? Had he dreamed something important? The feeling faded as he drove back to the ranger station. By the time he filed his report, conducted overnight surveillance at Cades Cove Shadowburn site, no unusual activity observed, no evidence of foul play in Ford disappearance. He'd forgotten there was anything to forget. Daniel Freeman continued working as a ranger at Great Smoky Mountains, continued investigating disappearances. Never connected them to a pattern because the pattern existed in his blind spot now, existed in the spaces his neurology had learned to ignore. He didn't remember the shadow people, didn't remember Alexis Ford explaining that she existed in multiple states, didn't remember the conversation about consensus reality and perceptual bandwidth. But sometimes, in his peripheral vision, he'd see something move wrong. Something human-shaped, but not human. Something that existed in the corners of attention and vanished when looked at directly. And in those moments, Daniel Freeman would feel a bizarre sense that reality was thinner than it seemed, that the solid world was consensus, that just beyond perception, infinite other versions of everything existed simultaneously. Then the feeling would pass. He'd dismiss it as fatigue, as stress, as the lingering effects of combat-related PTSD. He'd return to his work, to his investigations, to his carefully maintained worldview where things were solid and time was linear, and reality was singular. And the shadow people watched from their space between spaces, from the blind spots of consciousness, from the deleted data that made the signal comprehensible. They didn't take people. People crossed over on their own, stepped through cracks in consensus reality, saw too much and couldn't unsee it. Some returned. Most forgot. A few, like Alexis Ford and Marcus Chen and the others, stayed in the spaces between, experiencing all possible timelines simultaneously, alive and dead and trapped and free in equal measure across infinite instances. The shadow burns on trees marked the locations, marked where the boundary thinned, marked where attention failed and perception expanded, and humans briefly touched something their neurology wasn't designed to process. Daniel never figured out what caused them, never solved the disappearances, never understood that he'd had the answers and his brain had deleted them to maintain functional sanity. He continued working, continued living, continued existing in his single instance, his linear time, his limited bandwidth. And if sometimes he felt like he'd forgotten something important, like there was a conversation he'd had that mattered but couldn't quite recall, well, that was just how memory worked. The brain deleted irrelevant data to maintain the essential narrative. Reality was consensus. Daniel Freeman had agreed to that consensus by forgetting, had chosen functional limitation over overwhelming perception, had returned to the simple story because the complex truth would have broken him. The shadow people understood, held no grudge, simply waited in the spaces between attention, in the peripheral fields of vision, in the blind spots that let humans function without being overwhelmed by infinite complexity. And when the next person stepped through, when the next consciousness expanded beyond its designed bandwidth, the shadow people would be there. Not to take, not to trap, simply to witness. To exist in the spaces that consensus reality required be empty. Because something had to exist in the blind spots. Something had to occupy the deleted data. Something had to be what humans agreed not to see. They were the shadow people. They were the gaps in attention. They were the price of functional sanity. And they were always watching from just outside perception, patient and eternal, waiting for the next moment when consensus failed and someone saw too much. Daniel Freeman would never remember them, would never know he'd met them, would never understand that he'd been given a choice and had chosen forgetting. But somewhere in the spaces between his thoughts, in the blind spots of his attention, the memory existed. Fragmented, inaccessible, real. And if that tree in Cades Cove now showed 8 shadow burns instead of 7, if one of them was shaped exactly like a Park Service ranger, if Daniel sometimes drove past it and felt inexplicable unease, well, that was just the mountain playing tricks. Nothing more, nothing less, nothing that existed in the spaces between. Hope you felt genuine terror. If you appreciate authentic horror rooted in real folklore, consider following for more stories. Which moment scared you most? Your interpretation about what's real? Michelle Carter's iPhone 7 showed the voicemail notification at 0342 hours. Heather Bryant, timestamp 3 hours ago, duration 3:47. Michelle pressed play and heard her mentor screaming about trees that walked on root legs, trails that rewrote themselves behind her. A thing made of moss and eyes that spoke her name in a voice like wind through dead branches. The recording quality was perfect, no static, every word clear, including Heather's final sentence. Michelle, don't come looking. The forest doesn't want found, it wants... Then the sound of something wet, something breaking, and a voice that wasn't Heather using Heather's throat to whisper in a language Michelle didn't recognize but understood, meant, mine now, always mine. The trees remember everyone who cuts them. Michelle played the voicemail 7 times in her ranger station bunk, hands shaking, trying to apply 6 months of training to a situation that had no protocol. Heather Bryant was senior ranger, 15 years with the National Park Service, her field mentor since Michelle had graduated the academy in March. They'd been partnered on every deployment, Heather patiently teaching the 1,000 small skills that textbooks couldn't convey. How to read weather in leaf patterns, which animals signaled wrong by their absence. When to trust instinct over GPS. The voicemail shouldn't exist. Heather had been on routine trail maintenance in Cataloochee Valley, 12 miles into backcountry where cell coverage was theoretically impossible. Her radio check-ins had been normal. Aero 900 hours cleared Fallen Oak from Palmer Creek Trail, 1,300 hours lunch at Caldwell Fork Junction, 1,600 hours heading to Big Creek Campsite for overnight before finishing circuit tomorrow. Standard solo deployment for experienced ranger in September when traffic was light. Then silence until the voicemail at 0027 hours. 3 hours ago. Michelle had been sleeping, phone on silent because rookie rangers pulled every shift senior staff didn't want. She'd seen the notification when her alarm woke her for the 0400 shift rotation. Dispatch needed to know. Protocol said, report immediately. Wait for senior rangers to organize proper search and rescue. But the voicemail had said Michelle's name specifically. Don't come looking. Which meant Heather knew Michelle would, knew her rookie eagerness would override common sense. Michelle grabbed her pack anyway. Garmin GPS map 60 Forest, fully charged. Motorola VHF radio. iPhone 7 at 96% battery. GoPro Hero 5 black chest mounted for documentation. First aid kit, emergency shelter, 3 days food. Her bench-made Griptilian knife that Heather had given her after first successful solo patrol. Inscription reading, "Trust yourself, HB." She left a note for dispatch. Following up on Bryant's missed check-in, Cataloochee Valley Circuit, back by 1,800 hours. Not technically violating protocol if she framed it as proactive investigation rather than unauthorized rescue. Rookie logic, Heather would have called it. Do the thing you want, find justification later. The September morning was cool, fog settling into valleys like the mountains were exhaling. Michelle drove the Park Service truck 40 minutes to Cataloochee entrance, hiked in on Palmer Creek Trail as first light filtered through old-growth forest. Tulip, poplar, eastern hemlock, oak species she'd memorized from field guides. Trees here were 400 years old in places, trunks 8 feet across, canopy so dense it created permanent twilight at ground level. Heather's GPS track showed on Michelle's device. They shared location data for safety, standard partner protocol. The track ran normal for 12 miles, then stopped abruptly at coordinates that made Michelle's mapping software glitch. The location marker flickered, jumped half a mile east, returned to original position, jumped again. GPS satellites didn't malfunction like that. Position was position, triangulated from orbital assets that didn't care about terrain. Michelle reached the last normal waypoint at 0847 hours. Heather's chainsaw sat beside a cleared oak trunk, still shiny with bar oil. Her water bottle hung from a branch. Radio clipped to a stump, turned off. She'd set down her gear and walked into the forest without it. No signs of struggle, no blood, no animal tracks suggesting bear or cat encounter. Just abandoned equipment and a trail that continued northeast exactly as mapped. Michelle keyed her radio. Dispatch, this is Carter. Located Bryant's equipment at Palmer Creek mile marker 12. No sign of Ranger herself. Continuing search northeast on established trail. Static answered. She tried again, checked frequency, verified battery. The radio worked mechanically but couldn't find the relay tower that should have been clearly accessible from this elevation and angle. Her iPhone showed no signal, expected in backcountry, but the voicemail had come from here somehow, from coordinates where cellular transmission shouldn't penetrate. Michelle activated the GoPro, documenting everything. Evidence for the incident report, for whatever investigation would follow. Time is 0851 hours, September 23, 2016. Located Bryant's abandoned gear. GPS is showing anomalous behavior, location data inconsistent. Radio communication unsuccessful. proceeding with search. The trail continued clear for another mile, then started wrong. Subtle at first. The path curved left where Michelle's map showed it curving right. She stopped, checked the Garmin against the paper map Heather had taught her to always carry as backup. The paper showed right curve. The trail physically went left. She followed it anyway. Sometimes maps were outdated, sometimes trails got rerouted for erosion control. After 300 yards, the trail circled back to where she'd started. She was standing beside Heather's chainsaw again, except she'd just walked a clear loop that should have taken her half a mile northeast. Her GPS track log confirmed the distance, 0.34 miles traveled. The chainsaw said otherwise. Michelle tried again, this time following the right curve her map indicated even though no physical trail was visible. She pushed through underbrush, maintaining bearing, checking compass every 30 seconds. After 10 minutes of difficult bushwhacking, she emerged onto clear trail. The same trail, Heather's chainsaw, the same stump, except her previous GPS track wasn't visible on the device anymore. The log showed her starting from the ranger station, driving to Catalucci, hiking to this exact spot. No record of the loops she'd just walked. "That's not possible," Michelle said aloud. Grounding technique Heather had taught her. Vocalize observations to combat panic. GPS tracks don't delete themselves. I walked those loops. The data should exist. She pulled out her iPhone, checked the photo log. She'd taken pictures of the abandoned gear at 0851. Those photos still existed, but new photos from the two loops, the curved trail, the underbrush route, those weren't in the gallery despite Michelle clearly remembering taking them. The forest was too quiet. That's what finally penetrated her confusion. September in the Smokies should have bird calls, squirrel chatter, insects. Instead, silence so complete Michelle could hear her heartbeat in her ears. She played Heather's voicemail again. Trees that walked on root legs, trails that rewrote themselves. Michelle had dismissed it as panic, trauma, maybe bear encounter causing hallucination. Now standing beside equipment she'd reached 3 times via different routes, the explanation felt less impossible. Her radio crackled. Not dispatch. Heather's voice, clear and calm. "Michelle, you're doing exactly what I knew you'd do. Ignoring the warning. Coming anyway. The forest likes that. Likes eagerness. Likes people who think they're competent." A pause. Sound of wind through branches. "I thought I was competent too. 15 years meant I knew these woods, meant I understood the boundaries. I was wrong. The Smokies aren't forest. They're entity, and entities have rules." Michelle grabbed the radio. "Heather, where are you? Are you injured? I'm at your equipment. GPS is malfunctioning. I need your coordinates." More static. Then Heather's voice again, but different, layered, like multiple Heathers speaking slightly out of sync. "Can't give coordinates. Don't have position anymore. Position implies location in space. I'm in the forest now, Michelle, not walking through it. Part of it. Can feel every root system, every branch, every decomposing leaf. It's actually beautiful. Terrifying, but beautiful. You'll understand soon." "Heather, you're not making sense. Did you hit your head? Take any substances? I need you to..." The transmission cut to a sound that wasn't static. Organic. Like wood creaking under pressure, or lungs full of dirt attempting to breathe. Michelle dropped the radio, watching it crackle on the ground. Heather's voice emerging. "The Leshy doesn't like people who cut trees. Doesn't like chainsaws. Doesn't like trail maintenance that removes deadfall. Deadfall feeds the forest. We were taking food from something that's been here since these mountains formed. It tolerated us for decades because we were small, insignificant. But Heather Bryant cut down a 300-year-old oak yesterday. Chainsawed it for trail clearance. The Leshy felt that. Felt the tree scream. So it came for payment." Michelle's mind raced through training. Wilderness first aid didn't cover supernatural forest entities. Park Service orientation mentioned historical context. Slavic immigrants settling Catalucci Valley in the 1890s, bringing old country traditions, oral histories about forest guardians, but framed it as cultural anthropology, not operational reality. The Leshy was Slavic mythology, guardian spirit of forests, protector of old growth, punisher of those who harmed trees. Michelle had taken comparative folklore as an elective, remembered the general concept. Tall humanoid covered in moss and bark, owl eyes, voice that echoed from all directions, ability to disorient travelers and reshape forest space. Folklore. Not real. Except Michelle had walked 3 different routes to the same location, and her GPS couldn't decide where she was, and Heather's voice was coming from a radio that couldn't possibly reach her. Okay, Michelle said to herself to the silent forest, operating on hypothesis that something anomalous is occurring. Unknown entity or phenomenon affecting spatial navigation and electronic equipment. Hypothesis allows for range of explanations from equipment malfunction to other options. Professional framing. Make it investigation instead of panic. Heather had taught her that too. Michelle marked the chainsaw location with bright orange flagging tape tied to a branch at eye level. Reference point. She photographed it from 4 angles with her iPhone. Then she picked a direction, due north by compass, and walked exactly 100 paces, counting aloud, maintaining bearing. At pace 100, she marked another tree with flagging tape, photographed it, turned around and walked south, counting paces back. She reached the chainsaw at pace 73. Impossible. Distance was objective. 100 paces out meant 100 paces back, unless the forest had compressed distance in one direction, expanded it in the other. Michelle checked her photos. The orange flagging tape she'd just tied was visible in pictures from 3 hours ago, when she'd first found Heather's gear. Present in images time-stamped before she'd placed it. Causality was negotiable here. She'd learned that from Melissa Rodriguez. Michelle had read the incident report from Olympic National Park, the ranger who'd documented temporal anomalies and been quietly reassigned to administrative desk work. Everyone said Rodriguez had experienced psychological break following traumatic discovery of colleague's body. But the report's details had been too specific, too consistent with impossible phenomena. Now Michelle understood why Rodriguez had stopped trying to convince anyone. Her radio crackled again. Different voice this time, old male, accent that sounded Eastern European. Little ranger, little tree cutter, you come looking for your friend? The voice echoed from multiple directions simultaneously, originating from the trees themselves. She's here. Part of growth now. Roots need blood. Soil needs bone. The forest accepts all offerings. Michelle spun, trying to locate the source. Saw nothing but trees, fog, the oppressive green twilight of old growth canopy. I'm not here to cut trees, she said, keeping voice steady. I'm here to find Heather Bryant and ensure her safety. I mean no harm to the forest. Laughter like wind through hollow trunks. Mean no harm? You wear boots that crush seedlings, carry knife of metal harvested from earth, breathe air the trees make. You are harm. All humans are. But the forest is generous, offers bargain. 1 ranger given, 1 ranger leaves. Heather Bryant stays. Michelle Carter goes. Fair trade. No trade. I'm taking Heather home. Confident, like she was. Confident rangers make best fertilizer. Their certainty feeds roots deeper. Something moved in Michelle's peripheral vision. She turned, saw nothing, turned back, and the forest had changed. The chainsaw was gone. Heather's water bottle, the radio. All equipment vanished, replaced by undisturbed moss and ferns like no human had ever been here. Her GPS now showed her position 3 miles southwest of the actual location. Her track log still showed her at the ranger station, hadn't moved all morning. The photos on her phone were corrupting in real time. Heather's gear pixelating into static, orange flagging tape dissolving into image noise. Michelle forced herself to think. Heather had taught her. When navigation fails, establish reliable landmark and work outward systematically. Find something that can't change, a major stream, a ridgeline, a road. Big Creek was 1/2 mile east, significant water flow, too large for even anomalous phenomenon to hide. She oriented to east by compass and started walking. The forest resisted. Not metaphorically, physically. Branches reached across her path where none had been. Roots rose from soil, ankle-height trip hazards appearing with each step. The ground itself felt wrong, sloping upward when her topo map showed downslope to the creek. Michelle pushed through anyway, rookie determination overriding rational fear. After 20 minutes of fighting vegetation, she heard water. Big creek, unmistakable sound of major stream flow. She broke through the last line of underbrush and found herself in a clearing she'd never seen on any map. Old structures stood in various states of collapse. Cabins from Catalucci's settlement era, built by Slavic immigrants a century ago, and abandoned when the park was established in 1934. Most settlement buildings had been removed or had decayed completely. These looked wrong, too well preserved, doors still hanging, windows intact, smoke curling from a chimney despite no one living here for 8 decades, and everywhere, trees, growing through floors, pushing through walls, roots tearing apart foundations. The forest was reclaiming the structures, but slowly, deliberately, like it enjoyed watching human construction fail piece by piece. Heather Bryant sat on a porch, back against a cabin wall. Michelle ran to her. "Heather, are you hurt? Can you walk? We need to get you to medical. You've been missing for..." She stopped 3 feet away. Heather was growing, not metaphor, literal growth. Her skin had texture like bark, roughening in patches across her arms and face. Her fingers were elongating, darkening, tips splitting into root-like tendrils that dug into the porch wood. Moss grew in her hair, green and vibrant. Her eyes had shifted color, brown irises now showing golden yellow, pupils contracting to vertical slits like an owl's. She smiled. Teeth were still human, but the jaw that held them was wrong, mandible extending too far, temporomandibular joint relocated to allow mouth opening wider than anatomy should permit. "Hey, rookie," Heather said. Her voice was still recognizable under the layered echo. "Took you 4 hours. I was betting 3. Guess even desperation has limits. What happened to you? What is this?" "Told you on the voicemail, the forest, the leshy. Payment for cutting that oak." Heather lifted her right hand, watching roots curl from her fingertips. "I thought it was folklore. Slavic immigrants, superstition, cultural remnant with no basis in observable reality. Then I put chainsaw to that tree and felt it scream. Not sound, feeling. Like cutting into something alive and aware and ancient. The leshy came before I could finish the cut. Asked why I was murdering, I said trail maintenance, safety protocol, standard procedure, wrong answer. We need to reverse this, get you medical attention. There has to be no reversal, Michelle. That's the point. The forest doesn't take temporarily, takes permanently. I'm being absorbed. Another 72 hours and I'll be tree, indistinguishable from the oaks around me. My consciousness will spread through root networks, become part of the mycorrhizal web. It's not death. It's transformation, integration." Michelle's hands found her radio, fingers moving through emergency protocols automatically. This was medical emergency, biohazard, unknown pathogen causing radical physiological transformation. Needed medevac, needed containment, needed. Heather's hand shot out, grabbed Michelle's wrist with grip like iron. The bark skin was rough, warm, alive. "Don't. Call for help and the leshy takes them too. Every person who enters becomes payment. Forest is hungry, Michelle. Has been hungry since pioneers started clear-cutting in the 1800s. Since the Park Service started managing wilderness. Every trail we maintain is wound. Every campfire is burning. The leshy tolerates small violations. But accumulation matters, we cross threshold. Then what do I do? Leave you here? Let you turn into a tree?" The leshy offered bargain. "One leaves, one stays. I'm already staying. You can go. Walk east to Big Creek. Follow it downstream. You'll reach the ranger station in 6 hours. Probably. Space is unstable here, but the creek is real. Has to obey physics because it predates the leshy's anger. I'm not leaving you." Heather's owl eyes blinked sideways. nictitating membrane Michelle had never seen before sliding across yellow irises. Rookie mistake number 8. Emotional attachment overriding operational necessity. We talked about this, about knowing when to cut losses, when to prioritize your own survival. Fuck operational necessity. You're my partner. Was your partner. Now I'm Forrest, and the Forest is offering you way out. Take it. Something moved between the cabins. Not human. Tall figure, maybe 8 feet, covered entirely in moss and lichen that grew in living patterns across its form. Where it stepped, mushrooms sprouted. Its face was wrong. Too long, too narrow, dominated by eyes that were golden and round and never blinked. The Leshy. It spoke in that layered voice. Touching. Loyalty. The Forest appreciates loyalty. Roots are loyal. Always reaching toward water, toward nutrition. Never abandoning the tree. It tilted its head at an angle no human neck achieved. Michelle Carter. 24 years. First season. 43 days employment. You have cut no trees, cleared no trails. You are clean. The bargain allows you departure. What if I refuse? Then 2 rangers feed roots. Forest grows stronger. More old growth protects itself. Balance shifts toward wildness, away from human control. The Smokies return to what they were before roads, before trails, before the arrogance of calling wilderness park. Michelle's mind raced through training that had no answers for this. Her GoPro was still recording, capturing everything, evidence that would never be believed. Her GPS showed her location as somewhere in Nevada. Her phone was corrupting its own photo gallery, deleting images as she watched. There has to be another option, she said. Some kind of compromise. Restitution without permanent transformation. Community service for the Forest, something. The Leshy laughed. Trees swayed without wind. Restitution? You offer to serve? Clean little ranger wants to pay debt? It moved closer, each step causing earth to shift, moss spreading in its wake. There is work, always work. The Forest needs tenders, needs those who understand balance. Who will guard old growth from humans who see only lumber, only fuel, only obstacles to clearing? What kind of work? Heather Bryant cut tree. That violation bought her transformation. But you, Michelle Carter, you are clean. If you swear service, 20 years tending this valley, ensuring no chainsaws, no trail expansion, no human harm, the Forest releases Heather. Partial release. She remains changed but conscious, mobile, able to leave. You remain ranger, but your loyalty shifts. You serve the Smokies, not the Park Service. Michelle looked at Heather, bark spreading across her mentor's chest, roots curling deeper into porchwood. 20 years was career-length commitment. Would mean lying to supervisors, sabotaging trail maintenance, preventing the very work rangers were employed to perform. And if I refuse? If I try to leave with Heather anyway? Then neither leaves. Both become Forest. And the next ranger sent to find you meets same choice. The Forest is patient, will consume Park Service one ranger at a time until humans learn boundaries. Heather's voice, barely recognizable now. Take the deal, rookie. Get yourself out. I made my choice when I fired up that chainsaw. You didn't. You don't owe me this. Yes, I do. You taught me everything I know. Kept me from a dozen stupid mistakes. I'm not leaving you to become a tree. Exactly the kind of rookie decision I'd expect. Emotional, impulsive, tactically unsound. But Heather smiled. Human smile despite the transforming face. Okay, 20 years. Make them count. Don't let me down. Michelle turned to the Leshy. I swear, 20 years service to the Forest. I'll protect this valley, prevent harm to old growth, maintain the boundaries. In exchange, Heather Bryant is released, transformation halted, free to leave. The Leshy extended one moss-covered hand. Where its palm should be, a circular pattern like tree rings, like a contract written in living wood. Touch. Bind yourself. The Forest witnesses, the mountains witness. Break the oath and transformation resumes. For both of you. Michelle placed her hand against the tree ring pattern. Pain shot through her arm. white-hot and total, like every nerve ending igniting simultaneously. She felt the forest entering her consciousness, roots pushing into her mind, showing her things. Every tree in the Smokies, every stream, every animal, all perceived simultaneously through a network of awareness that predated human existence. She was individual and collective, Michelle Carter and something much older. Consciousness expanded beyond singular perspective. Then it released her. Michelle gasped, falling to her knees, hand smoking slightly where it had touched the leshy. A mark remained on her palm, perfect circle of tree rings, burned into skin deep enough that healing would leave permanent scar. The leshy stepped back. Where it had stood, Heather was changing, reversing. Bark receding from skin, roots withdrawing from porchwood, owl eyes fading back to human brown. The transformation wasn't complete. Moss still grew in patches through her hair. Her fingers retained slight woody texture, but she was recognizably human again. She stood shakily. Michelle caught her, supported her weight. 20 years, the leshy said. The forest remembers, the mountains witness. Serve well, Michelle Carter. Protect what humans would destroy, or join what you protect. It stepped backward into the tree line and vanished, not walked away. Vanished, absorbed into the forest itself, moss and lichen and bark reconfiguring into normal vegetation patterns. The clearing dissolved around them. Michelle blinked and they were standing on Palmer Creek Trail, mile marker 12. Heather's abandoned equipment exactly where Michelle had first found it. Her GPS showed correct coordinates. Phone showed normal signal. The GoPro had 4 hours of footage of Michelle walking in circles, talking to empty air, touching trees. No clearing, no cabins, no leshy. Just normal September forest. Except the mark on Michelle's palm, and the moss in Heather's hair that wouldn't wash out. They hiked out together in silence. Reached the ranger station at 16:47 hours. Michelle filed report. Equipment located. Ranger Bryant found mild dehydration and disorientation. Recommend 3 days medical observation. Standard wilderness incident. Heather corroborated. Got confused in the fog. Went off trail. Took shelter in a seasonal hunter's cabin until mental state cleared enough to navigate. GPS malfunction, radio malfunction, combination of equipment failure and human error. The investigation accepted their story. Michelle Carter and Heather Bryant returned to duty after 72 hours. Both showed good judgment under stress, maintained professional standards, worked well as a team. The GoPro footage was corrupted, unable to be recovered. 20 years began. Michelle learned what it meant to serve the forest. Trail maintenance requests got delayed for equipment issues or scheduling conflicts. Old growth sections were marked for preservation, preventing expansion even when Park Service pushed for accessibility. When hikers reported feeling watched in certain valleys, Michelle filed reports noting local wildlife and quietly encouraged visitors to stay on main trails. She felt the forest now. Not constantly. The leshy's presence wasn't oppressive, but she knew when someone was cutting live trees, knew when trail crews were planning expansion into protected areas, knew when the boundaries were being tested. And sometimes in dreams, she walked through that clearing with the impossible cabins, stood before the leshy, and received instructions whispered in a voice like wind through ancient branches. Heather retired after 2 years. The partial transformation had left her unable to fully reintegrate with normal life. She bought property bordering the park, planted native species, tended a forest garden. The moss in her hair remained. Her fingers kept their woody texture. Some nights, she felt roots trying to grow from her feet, seeking soil. They didn't talk about it. Couldn't, without risking investigation, psychological evaluation, forced retirement. Michelle visited when she could, brought updates about the valley, about which sections were staying wild, about tourists who'd gotten too deep into protected groves, and emerged speaking about tall figures in moss who'd shown them the way out. The mark on Michelle's palm darkened with time, tree rings becoming more defined, as if her skin was aging into wood grain. She kept it covered, wore gloves even in summer. No one asked why. 18 years later, A new ranger, fresh from the academy, got assigned to Michelle's district. Eager kid, early 20s, wanted to prove himself through aggressive trail maintenance. He had plans for Catalucci Valley, talked about clearing old-growth deadfall, establishing new campsites in the backcountry. Michelle watched him present the proposal, watched park administration approve it, and felt the forest's response like pressure against her skull. That night she hiked into Catalucci alone, found the clearing that officially didn't exist. The Leshy was waiting. 2 years remain, it said. Your service has been adequate. The valley stays wild, the old growth persists, but new threats emerge. This young ranger, he will cut trees. I'll stop him, delay the projects, redirect him to safer areas. He will resist, will push, will eventually succeed unless Forest responds. The Leshy's owl eyes fixed on her. You have choice. Complete your service. 20 years ends, you are released, oath fulfilled, walk away. Let what happens happen. Michelle thought about the new ranger, about herself at 24, eager and convinced of her competence, about Heather being absorbed into porchwood, becoming tree. Or, she asked, or extend service, another 20 years, and the forest grants you authority, ability to truly protect, to be more than ranger with delayed paperwork, to be guardian. What does guardian mean? The Leshy smiled, expression wrong on its elongated face. Mean you become something between human and forest, like Heather almost did, but with consciousness intact, mobility preserved. Mean you can enforce boundaries the forest cannot currently reach. Mean you give more of yourself but gain protection for the valley. Michelle looked at the mark on her palm. 18 years binding herself to service that destroyed her career prospects, isolated her from normal human connection, made her complicit in obstructing park management. 2 more years and she could walk away. Find new work, new life. Leave the forest to whatever fate awaited. Or she could stay, could give another 20 years, could transform into something that could actually protect what she'd spent 2 decades guarding. If I extend, Michelle said, what happens to the new ranger? If you extend, you handle him, your responsibility, your methods. The forest trusts its guardians to maintain boundaries as needed. Michelle thought about all the ways that could be interpreted, thought about what handling might require, thought about lines between protection and harm, between guardian and enforcer. I need time to decide. Time given, 2 years. Complete original oath or renew with extended service. The forest waits. The clearing dissolved. Michelle stood on Palmer Creek Trail alone, dawn breaking through old-growth canopy, birdsong returning as the Leshy's presence faded. She hiked out, filed her patrol report. Normal evening in the Smokies, nothing unusual to document. The new ranger started trail maintenance that week. Michelle watched him work, watched the forest respond, and wondered what her decision would be when the 2 years ended. The mark on her palm ached. The trees whispered. And somewhere in the valley, in a clearing that officially didn't exist, the Leshy waited. Patient. Always patient. The forest had time, had mountains, had centuries of growth and decay and renewal. What were 20 more years against that? What was one ranger's humanity against the preservation of something ancient and wild and untouchable? Michelle didn't know yet, but she had 2 years to decide who she was. Human who walked away, or guardian who stayed. The trees would have their answer, one way or another. Hope you felt genuine terror. If you appreciate authentic horror rooted in real folklore, consider following for more stories. Which moment scared you most? Share your theory about what happened.